Special meeting specifically to discuss stormwater and storm sewer issues by Zoom on Wednesday of this week. That is the 23rd. You can tune in and watch us on YouTube. You can make comments by emailing as per the agenda, which is published online. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public comment. Seeing none, we'll move on to the Radnor Fire Company presentation.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Berzunas, Executive Director with the Radnor Fire Company. I'd like to thank the Board of Commissioners for inviting us in for a few minutes, just to give you an update on where we're at in 2020. So let's get right into it. I'm just going to hit variables and areas of concern with the budget that we have currently and throughout the rest of this year. Give you an idea where our budget performance is year to date, talk about some of the special funding that will be welcome news for the Township to hear, as well as discussing utilization of how we're using the funding that you all provide to us to keep our operation running. And then a few items looking forward. As everyone's talked about quite a bit this year, COVID-19 pandemic for us has been a pretty big deal. Obviously, our business is responding, helping people in the community, especially those that are sick and ill. That continues to be a major focus for our organization, both from a response standpoint, as well as focus on keeping our personnel, both paid and volunteer, healthy and ready to respond to calls. Insurance reimbursements, we talked about quite a bit on this topic over the years. That continues to be a significant concern for the fire company, and that would be the case if COVID was occurring or not. Volunteerism, always a moving target for us. Radnor Fire Company has done several things to help bolster the ranks internally with doing different things to help encourage folks to continue their volunteerism, as well as smoothing out the process for onboarding of personnel in the fire company. Folks that want to join as volunteer firefighters, as well as volunteer EMTs. And that is a process that is continuing. And again, volunteer engagement is very difficult at times. You throw on a pandemic on top of it with restrictions both inside the firehouse and extra precautions you need to take in the field. It's very stressful for folks that are just trying to volunteer their time. Adds a whole other layer of complexity into our operation, not just at Radnor, but in fire EMS agencies across the country. State and federal legislation, last thing I touch on. You've seen some movement at the state level with a few different issues involving volunteer recruitment retention, as well as starting some process with improving reimbursements, direct payment as we call it, for EMS. Unfortunately, again, with the pandemic, a lot of these things got put on the back burner. We're going to try to start getting re-engaged some of our state reps again, especially State Representative Amara, working on some of the legislation we started to work on in 2019, the beginning of 2020. Unfortunately, things kind of had to get reprioritized, obviously. So it's something we haven't lost sight of and something we want to get back to, because that's a big deal and a big portion of our budget, which you all are very familiar with over the years in the presentations that I've been providing. Federal government has done a few things. You'll see some of the legislation in particular that has helped stabilize our operations this year, as well as really as a whole assisting our ability to deliver our services in the Radnor community. Year-to-date budget performance, again, just keep this very basic for everybody. Right now, we're tracking about $86,000 ahead, income versus expense, really due to three primary reasons. The township support that we're receiving, grant funding that we received from both the state and federal government, donations from residents, and holding our own with ambulance billing reimbursements. As we get towards the end of this year, some of that downturn we saw with some call volume with a lot of our commercial and office areas being completely empty. So while people are home trying to stay safe, reduce their chance for exposure. Obviously, there's no people in a lot of these buildings. We're not getting the falls, the allergic reactions, cardiac arrests, fire alarms going off, car fires in the parking lot, mulch fires in the parking lot. All those types of things slow down to an extent. We start to see some of that come back up. In September, we did 193 ambulance calls, and that's about a typical month for us for EMS pre-COVID. In the middle of the pandemic, our call volume fluctuated anywhere from about 130 to 150 or so calls. It was down slightly. The difference was that the calls that we were going to, we were transporting a super majority of the time, because the one thing it did help in a sense, and this is something Commissioner Booker's brought up routinely, with some of these people that call for these instances that really aren't quote-unquote an emergency, we still need to go. It forced people to really make a conscious decision, do I really need a 911 ambulance to come to my house? So that was another driver of folks like, oh, and they're also just, quite frankly, scared out of their mind because they're seeing on the news that they go to the hospital, they're immediately going to track COVID as soon as they step foot in the hospital. So that was another part of it as well, just some of the fear that people felt with potential for exposure. But yeah, that's just to give you kind of an idea with EMS billing reimbursables. But we anticipate that through the end of the fourth quarter, we'll start to see, we have seen some dip with the EMS reimbursements. We'll probably see that through the end of this year with call volume going back up. Some of the calls we're seeing now, we'll realize that in the first quarter of 2021 from a budgetary standpoint. But I mean, one thing, and a few folks from different neighboring agencies, we've been communicating with each other, trying to collaborate. And I think the biggest thing for us that has enabled us not to be in a panic, we're definitely being very conscious with our spending, is the fact that we have strong support from our municipality. If we did not have that, we would have some serious problems right now that some other agencies, unfortunately, are encountering during this difficult period. Fire EMS special funding coordination. I thought it would be helpful for not just the Board of Commissioners, but the community to understand that we are exploring every avenue possible for funding. Simply put, we're not just coming here dumping on the township saying, give us more money, this is your problem. We as a group, our Board of Directors, our leadership, our Chief's office, have really focused on, okay, what different things can we go after as far as funding opportunities for the fire company, because we are very cognizant of the challenges the township faces with the mercantile tax that was talked about in previous meetings and some other various budgetary constraints that you all have looking at the 2021 budget. That's driven a lot of the effort we put forth here. We did a joint grant with Berwyn and Paley fire companies. That was a federal grant, the AFGS. It was a special grant program associated with the pandemic response. So we were awarded a grant in the amount of $21,237. That's helping with specific equipment acquisition for items related to our response to the COVID, but it's also tools and things that we can use for non-COVID related response as well, which is a great benefit. I'll finish up with Save for Last. CARES Act, which everyone's familiar with, the PPP program. We eventually got it during the second round, very close to the end. That resulted in $206,700. That enabled us not to reduce our staffing, to keep things moving along. Along with the CARES Act, there was some funding through the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level. Because we are a Medicare agency and we bill for Medicare type calls, they had a set funding formula in place that we submitted a very simple application, and we got a direct payment related to some of the struggles with ambulance reimbursement and just some of the different challenges we're dealing with. There's just another mechanism for the federal government to get some funds diverted down to their local services like us. So that was the $15,000 from HHS. The state established a COVID, they call it the Fire EMS crisis grant funds. Essentially, it's a duplicate payment similar to what we see with our normal state funding for Fire EMS. It's around $24,000. Unfortunately, due to some of the bureaucracy, we don't know when we're going to get this. So, Radnor, Berwyn, Narberth, Newtown Square, Paley, Mount East Soil, and everybody's kind of waiting. Okay, when are we going to get this money? I've been told it has to be dispersed by December 30th, so we'll see it. That has to be spent directly on COVID items. During the initial phases of this legislation, the way it was kind of pitched, for organizations that couldn't do normal fundraisers, you can't do fire prevention outreach, which unfortunately we're not going to be doing this year, which does bring in some donations. The idea of that funding was to help kind of fill that gap. Well, not really how it ended up. Now we're kind of boxed in a corner a little bit how we can spend that money, and it has to be on COVID-related items. We're going to figure it out so we get the full benefit of that payment. Just to give everybody understanding, it is targeted funding. It's not, we can just use it for whatever we want, including paid staff. And finally, this is a big one. This is something that Finance Director Tate, Manager White, and I've talked about for a number of years. Going after SAFER grant money, that's staffing for adequate fire and emergency response for FEMA. This is the most competitive grant program that exists in the United States. Pretty intense application process. Our chief's office is involved, our directors, a number of folks in getting this application prepared. We were awarded, as you see up there, $492,000 that will enable us to hire 2 full-time employees for a 3-year period. The one thing, again, I've mentioned COVID several times, that the federal government decided, unlike what typically happens at SAFER where there's a local match requirement, there's no match. So we're essentially getting 2 free people for 3 years. And then in the 4th year, the intention is we will continue those positions at 100%. But again, as we're looking at the budget and kind of where we're at, as we're looking to scale with paid staff, I mean, this is tremendous, not just for the fire company, but for the community to kind of keep our progression going to ensure, again, our volunteers are being supported adequately by our awesome career staff at Radnor. So that's a big one. And we were awarded in round 1, and awards were cut by 30% nationally compared to previous years. So I think everybody could be pretty proud as a Radnor community that we were awarded that grant. 2 more, and I will be done. One thing that Manager White just asked me to touch on, utilization of Radnor Township funding. Really, the funding is being used well. That is improving our overall service delivery to the community. As I talked about a few work sessions upstairs, we've really focused on turnout time. That time from when we're receiving that alarm to the time we get wheels moving out the door. Because that's really, at the end of the day, we have total control over that time period. Once our trucks hit the road, we have traffic lights, we have weather, we have all kinds of different variables that we do not have control of. That turnout time is really where you can have the most impact in terms of reducing that overall time to get to someone's problem, whether it's an ambulance call or a fire issue. In terms of tonight, just high level on this, but I could certainly get further into the weeds with folks offline. Those times have been reduced with the increased staffing due to the funding the township has provided, which is phenomenal. Continuing with this theme, the full-time employee cadre that we talked about in previous meetings, with the funding that the township has provided, those positions have all been filled in 2020. That roster is full to an extent as far as this presentation goes. And as I already mentioned, we're gonna move forward with those 2 SAFER hirings. It's in the process now. They will start either January 1 or February 1, depending on how it shakes out with the hiring for those 2 new positions. And finally, looking forward, our main focus through the end of the year is controlling our expenses, staying focused on keeping our people safe and healthy. If we have an outbreak in our agency, that's a big problem. That puts pressure on mutual aid companies, and it's a situation none of us want to be in, especially our chief's office, who are tasked with running our operations on a daily basis. That's some agencies, unfortunately, have had to deal with that. We have so far, cross your fingers, we have not, and that's really our big goal, especially not just with COVID, but we're getting to the flu season. Everyone knows how flu season is. It's always a pain in the butt, and we're trying to avoid any issues as best we can from a staffing perspective. Again, continue our management of expenses as carefully as we can, hopefully stay where we're at from an operating perspective. One thing, again, we're not doing it right now, but looking forward, in particular with the township manager and finance director, is really drilling down on a 5-year plan. Ultimately, we have to plan for the future. I think Radnor as a whole, the commissioners, the staff, us, we've all worked together to make sure the funding is there, to make sure we're providing a strong good service for the citizens and the taxpayers, and at least getting a good plan, basically from working in 2021, laying that groundwork for 2022 forward is important. Looking at our facilities, our staffing, volunteer recruitment or retention, basically any issues that we feel are important, prioritize those and lay those out in a 5-year budget plan. Kind of rolled into the next one already. Volunteer recruitment or retention. Manager White and I have discussed a few items. Those are some things maybe in the near term we can work on, including the tax credit. And again, that's something he and I can partner on, and we can get that thing across the finish line. And finally, and I know this is another big topic for the township. It comes up quite a bit. Is Villanova University. We've spent a considerable amount of time this year working with their governmental affairs office, working with their public safety director, police chief, having very good conversations with them about areas where we can collaborate, and again, giving them real-time exposure of what calls are running on campus. And I'm very satisfied with the progress we've made this year, even despite, obviously, what's going on. You're doing Zoom meetings, having phone calls, email exchanges. So I'm happy to report to the board that we've made good progress, and I'm happy with where we're at. And I just want everybody to know we are working on it with Villanova, and they are being good partners with us in terms of fire EMS goes. So that effort's continuing. And that's all I have, President Larkin, unless there's any questions from yourself or the board or the staff or the public.
One question. What kind of tax credit would you be utilizing? First responders, how would you utilize a tax credit?
So the state legislator a couple years ago, they put into place the ability to do up to 20% of someone's property tax liability if they own property. So you could say, I want to do 5%, I want to do 10%. We would develop a, say, for members that are considered active.
Okay, it's for people who would volunteer, not for
Correct.
the department itself.
Correct, I apologize.
Okay, okay.
Yep,
And also, I heard anecdotally that there are increased calls for the ambulance for drug overdose and other issues related to COVID. Is that the case, or is that, what's your call numbers going up, not on these slips and falls in office, but home problems like drug overdose and other COVID-related incidents?
Yeah, we've definitely seen with your emotional disorders and your psychiatric emergencies, as well as domestic violence issues, folks getting hurt from that. And I know the Chief Flanagan's talked about that. Those are some of the issues that we're seeing. And I think generally, we had a lot of people that were away. You get that rush, folks coming back from vacation. You definitely see the accidents uptick with more travel, more return to normalcy, for lack of a better, explanation. But I think definitely still the super majority of times we're going out the door, it's for legitimate issues. Sure, you're getting, like we talked about, you get some folks that are, frequent flyers or frequent customers. Due to various reasons, unfortunately, they may not have a great support network.
You call them frequent flyers, or use the ambulance often?
That's what that's what it is. But yeah, I mean, we're, during the middle of the pandemic, I mean, there wasn't as much as what you were talking about. We started to see a little bit more, especially this past month. But I can certainly offline, I can give you the disposition of call breakdown if you would like that. That's not a problem at all. But thank you for the question.
So, go ahead. Oh, I just have a quick question. First, congratulations on the SAFER grant. I know
Thank you.
that's very exciting for you guys. You mentioned it will support 2 full-time employees for 3 years. So what's the intent afterwards? Can you reapply for that grant, or is the idea to absorb those people into the budget, or?
The idea is we absorb those people into the budget. We will have the ability to apply for, successive, SAFER applications. Typically, the way SAFER works is like the SAFER is allocated to those 2 positions. Then any subsequent hirings are dedicated towards new positions. So in some instances, it'd be nice that, hey, you could use it for folks you already have, but it's solely based on new hires and new positions only. But the one good thing is there's no local match like there typically is. So you have 3 years to kind of work that plan of how you're going to fold them into the operation.
Director Brazunas, I just want to, on behalf of the township, bring a magnifying glass to two issues that you brought up. The first is a year ago, on behalf of the fire department, I know that you were before this board looking for increase in funding and a fairly dramatic increase in funding. But you laid out the plan, and I want to bring for the township and its residents, and certainly this board, a magnifying glass to the fact that you're back here a year later, and showing the fiduciary responsibility that was brought in utilization of that money in terms of the hiring and the staffing, and more importantly, the plan going forward. But in addition to that, I want to commend you personally and the chief's office and the board of directors at the fire company for going after this SAFER grant, because anybody that's been a part of a nonprofit, and especially in the fire and EMS world, knows that these grants are extensive in terms of the application process and the resources that are needed to go after these. But beyond that, especially in a state like Pennsylvania, they are incredibly, incredibly competitive in terms of where they land, and telling a good story and being able to do that on top of all your other duties and on behalf of the chief's office. I just want to commend you on that, because this is a large impact to the township, and I see it really as, you know, a step up in matching. So congratulations to you on that, but more importantly, on behalf of the township, its residents, and this board, thank you for going after that, and thank you for directing that.
So, Eamon, I have a couple questions. Your last bullet point, continue to build a positive relationship with Villanova University. I will say no one loves Villanova University as much as myself, and you guys may laugh. I am all about keeping everybody there safe and healthy. And that includes your students, okay, and the staff and many who live in my ward. So I want to know, you said you've had progress. So I have a couple questions, and you've talked to them for a year. What are you talking about for a year? What is this project? What are you trying to accomplish? I mean, I'll just break it down.
Sure.
What is your end goal? Because it just seems that that Villanova's MO is just keep talking to you and talking to the board, and every 2 years it gets mixed up a little bit so they can start over and they don't do anything. I know this time, a little bit later, last year, this board had a resolution which was basically saying, hey, there's a shortfall every year. Sometimes some of the universities, not just Villanova, but some of the universities and nonprofits cause some of that shortfall. And we asked them to help out. We haven't, it's my understanding that we haven't heard back, and I guess we're not going to. So before I'm comfortable, voting to give you guys any more money, and I'm not saying that you don't deserve it, it just seems to me that, with all due respect, it just seems that it's words, so to speak, with them. And I know that you're trying to keep everybody safe, and that's my goal too. So, sorry to get back to my original point is, what have you talked about to VU for a year? What is your end goal? And you're building a positive relationship, but if you haven't gotten anything done, and I don't see anything, I don't see any press releases that you've done X, Y, or Z, so what's happened in this past year?
Okay, sure. Thank you for the question. I think really it's twofold. Obviously, look, I mean, the financial aspect is important. The other aspect is, regardless of where we get, and I'll get to that in a second, we're trying to make sure that when especially our EMS team is down there interacting with public safety, everybody's on the same page. Information sharing as far as, if we're trying to follow up on an EMS bill for a student, that information is getting exchanged seamlessly, which it is. And really, quite frankly, just, building a good rapport down there. We don't, the way I try to approach it, the way the fire committee tries to approach it, like you said, we're trying to do what's best for the community. And the money part, yes, that's important. That's a secondary thing for us. Now, as far as, the conversations, specifically with Villanova, it really centered around the billing component. So, as Commissioner Booker, yourselves, and others in the past have asked several questions of Villanova about, okay, how are we dealing with, reduce some of the calls, are getting reimbursed. So that's really where our focus has been. There's, legal process involved with that, with HIPAA, contractual items already getting worked through. So essentially what we're trying to do in a nutshell is any student who's getting transported to our ambulance services, they're getting folded under the same agreement. Whether VEMS is involved, their student-run EMS with our medic, or it's just us on campus. That's what we're working on. There's several hoops that need to get jumped through. It certainly isn't for lack of effort on our part or lack of effort with the leadership at Villanova. It's really just we each have our own respective things that we're working through, and we're getting very close on this topic. And this has really been something that's brewing for a long time, and we're almost there. So, I mean, once we have something tangible, it's completed, I'll be able to come back to the board here and tell you what that is.
So you can't give us, you're saying that you have something, but you're not going to say what it is?
Well, it's a bill. We already have a billing agreement with them. We've had a billing agreement.
Okay.
I'm in my 12th year at Radnor. They've had a billing agreement well before that. The idea with is any student, because right now if we go up there for a call and VEMS responds, our medic assists them, we have a contract that covers that agreement. Okay. So what happens is there's a direct payment that goes from Villanova back to Radnor, and that's how that works. If we go up and VEMS is not involved, we do our normal billing. So as I've talked about in bunch of meetings, it's almost like Groundhog Day sometimes, we end up chasing our tails trying to get paid because the check goes back to the patient, and the complexity of Villanova, Cabrini, Eastern Military Academy, most of the students do not live around here. They're in Oklahoma, Texas, wherever, and parents are involved, and it's very messy trying to sort bills out. And that's what we're trying to, can we make it easier, not just for us from a collection standpoint, can we make it less stressful for the student who is getting saddled with a substantial EMS bill? How do we make that process smoother? And that's what we're working through with Villanova now.
Okay, just 3 more quick questions.
I do want to be mindful of the time.
Yeah, I
We've
know.
been here
They're
for about
gonna be
25
quick.
minutes,
Yeah,
so maybe one more quick question.
No, it'll be 3 more quick questions. Thank you.
We got to move on after
No,
this, Sean.
yeah. Well, I'm going to ask, this is a large proponent of our budget, Jack, so I think it's fair that we ask.
Villanova has nothing to do with it, Sean. That was a waste of almost 5 minutes. Let's
Well,
focus.
then, he was the one that answered it, so, Eamon, what is the shortfall when it comes to Villanova not paying the bills? Because that's something that the township, and what is the breakdown between schools? I just need numbers real quick.
Sean, we
can
got to
give that
not
to you
turn this into Villanova.
I can provide that offline. I don't have that right in front of me here. but I
Okay,
can-
and
I
then
can
one
certainly
more
provide that as I have in the
question.
past.
Do you, as the chief, I don't know your position, did you support the resolution that we, last year, where we were asking Villanova and the other nonprofits for money to help with the fire? Are you aware of that or not?
I'm aware of it. I think the short answer is nobody consulted directly with the fire company.
Okay.
So, I mean, that was, respectfully, like, that was the problem. And part of the, if we're being very candid here, part of the reason we're kind of trying to dig ourselves out of the hole with Villanova was a direct result of the resolution.
Okay.
And, I mean, that's just the reality. I mean, there's no point to sugarcoat it. That did not help us. I just told you
Okay,
it
I just
didn't
don't know
help us.
how that and a billing would conflict, but, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to the consent agenda. Is there any item that the commissioners would like to pull from the consent agenda?
Letter B,
And C.
Okay, let's start with B. Resolution number 2020-114, adopting the 2021 minimum municipal obligation MMO. Bill, I'm assuming that that's you or Bob?
Well, I'm going to do a quick handoff and let Mr. Tate run with that.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Mr. President. In accordance with Act 205, the municipality is required by law to adopt a minimum municipal obligation. That's the minimum amount that the township is required to fund in the civilian and police pension plans. This adoption is done annually, required by September 30th. And what you have before you tonight is the resolution outlining the assumptions and the calculations, much of this provided by the actuary, that provides us with the number that we need to include in our 2021 budget to fund our civilian and police pension plans.
How much is the total that we're planning on funding based on these calculations from the actuary?
The total funding requirement is, before the state aid, is $4,283,700.
So it's $4.3 million, and we're facing a shortfall this year. Why don't we delay this, adopting this, until we have more visibility into what our shortfall is going to be for 2021?
Well, the only difficulty there is that by law, the adoption needs to be made by September 30th. And based on the calculations, this is the minimum amount required to meet the obligations. This doesn't provide for 100% pension funding, but it does provide for enough sufficient funding that we're not in a distressed status or any negative category as deemed by the state.
Well, Bob and Bill, $4.3 million is about 10% of our budget, and this is an extraordinary year with extraordinary circumstances. Why wouldn't we defer acting on this until a later date and also adjust it to reflect the current conditions of the revenue inflow, especially the shortfall relating to it?
Sure, I'll jump in. And it's a good question. As Bob pointed out, this is a requirement of the state. There's an act, the Act 205 is what we're complying with by adopting this before September 30th so we can get it over to the state and be compliant. Being compliant with Act 205 carries with it assurance that we will get our state aid, which is roughly $1 million per year. So out of that $4.3 million, we will get state aid in the ballpark of $900,000 or so that will directly offset this expense. But in order to get that state aid, you have to be compliant with all the provisions of the Act. And adopting this tonight and filing it before the end of September is a critical step to that. One other note to add to this, that this is the, and we've talked about this in years past. We can adopt this tonight, and if there are major payroll changes or major changes to the payroll between now and when we get the budget adopted, we can amend this and adopt a revised MMO and submit that at the time that the budget is adopted. So we are we're complying with the Act by adopting and filing this before the end of the month, but we are not committed to these numbers specifically. Again, if there's significant changes to the payroll estimates, then we can file an amended MMO.
But again, Bill, there won't be any significant changes to the payroll that we're foreseeing, that at least that I've heard about, but there is significant changes to the revenue collections, and we deferred the collection of tax, and we have more incidents, I would guess, this year of defaults on payments for ad valorem. So I would ask that we defer this and not adopt this at this point.
Understand. The state is not as generous with their relaxing of requirements.
The same state that's imposing all these requirements on us, including these limitations and so on.
What-
Also, are we doing anything less? For instance, I know that the school district, is closed, and, they're presumably not doing as much with maintenance in their buildings, and we should be saving. Are we saving any money through our COVID shutdown procedures?
So two different things. First of all, saving those funds would not directly translate into a reduced MMO because these are based on projected numbers for next year. And the MMO we adopted last September was paid in 2020. And so that, it's not based on actual numbers, it's based on a forecast of payroll.
Well, I guess, well, you talked about if we change our payroll, so suppose we have continuing shutdowns, we have less people working because there's less need for police, public works, and administrative services at the township. Is that a possibility, or is that not a possibility?
Well, it's always a possibility. I'll just answer it in the strictest mathematical terms. If the payroll estimates go down, the MMO will go down.
I guess I'm asking in your judgment, is that something we should anticipate or something we should not anticipate?
Yeah, I don't have enough information yet on our 2020 revenues to guesstimate tonight on what the 2021 payroll will look like. That's something we'll talk about later in tonight's agenda with the budget calendar that we're hoping to nail down here in the next 3 to 4 weeks and present back to the board in mid-October.
I will move for resolution number 2020-104. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any additional commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment? Moving on to item C, motion. Oh, you're right, thank you. I was thinking we would do a vote all at the end. All in favor of resolution number 2020-104, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 6-1. Moving on to item C, motion to authorize the Public Works Department to receive sealed bids for the annual tree and stump removal project.
So I'll start this conversation and then kick it off to either Mr. Simmons or Mr. Norsini to fill in some of the gaps. But the genesis of this is the fact that the township is responsible for trees in the right-of-way. And throughout the year, the township will get calls from residents, or our own crews will identify trees in the rights-of-way that are sick, dying, dead, or pose some sort of threat. Over the last few years, as those came up, those trees were removed immediately. Beginning this year, we decided to, as those calls came in and as those trees were identified, we created 2 categories. And we asked Mr. Hosbeck to opine on every instance whether the tree was in need of immediate removal, where it posed an immediate threat. And under those circumstances, those trees were removed immediately. Or alternatively, if the tree was just in decline or posed a future threat, we added it to this list, accumulated the list over the last 9 months, and are bringing it to the board now for adoption. With the primary reason being by lumping them all together, going out to bid, and making it a competitive situation, the opportunity to have these trees removed at a lower cost in total is greater than doing it on a per tree basis. As I understand it, this is how the township's done it in years ago. So we wanted to get back to that, again, trying to be more, well, not more, but looking at it from the perspective of trying to save some money on getting these trees down. But in every case, the trees on this list have been identified by Mr. Hosbeck, has determined that they are in need of removal, and that's why it's coming before the board tonight. Oh, and one other important note is that this entire program forever has been funded out of the township's general fund. So these are normal revenues of the township that fund the removal of trees. I know during our budget discussions in years past, I just want to make it clear that the commemorative shade tree fund, which receives monies from donations as well as any violations to the shade tree fund or shade tree ordinance, as well as general fund transfers, that fund is used for the sole purpose of planting trees. So I just want to make it clear that the trees, as part of what is in front of the board tonight to be removed, are paid for out of the township's general fund.
I have a question. The list that we're looking at, are these trees that are the ones that are on or near residences? Have we been in contact with those folks and they're aware of the situation?
So Commissioner Mulroney, these trees are in the right-of-way.
Okay.
And I believe, so I'm not involved with this, but this was, Mr. White summed it up great. This was how it used to be done, looking for economies of scale. So usually it's the resident that comes to us that says, hey, this tree concerns me. So we'll make sure all the residents are aware. And the one thing the Shade Tree Commission asked was that we get the DBH, the diameter of breast height, and Public Works can work with the arborist on that too.
And Steve,
Okay, I appreciate that. I just think the residents need to know it's coming.
Yes.
If they haven't been the ones that asked for it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I apologize to put you on the spot. Are the trees marked?
John?
Yes, and I'll also second Steve. So most of the times I do knock up on the resident's door, and I think about 80% of the trees on that list are residential in the right-of-way. So I do knock up on the door, and again, most of them do call in. And yes, these trees are marked with either ribbon or white marking paint.
But to the commissioner's point, we'll make sure that everybody does know. Public Works will make sure everybody's aware.
So are all these trees being removed, or some trees being removed and some trees have been removed and we're just removing the stumps?
So these are removals and also pruning.
Okay.
No trees have been removed on this list yet.
Okay, so there's no, okay, because I see the word stump, and then I'm wondering if we could do that in-house.
So Commissioner, the way this contract works, it's the removal of the tree, the grinding of the stump, the placement of topsoil, and seed and mulch. So it's a turnkey project. That's why it says tree removal, stump removal, and
Now,
pruning.
none of this can be done in-house, correct?
I'll defer to Mr. Simmons, but we'd have to get a stump grind, either rent or purchase a stump grinder to do that work. This is part and parcel of getting that.
So it would be more economical than to farm this out as opposed to have some of our public works to get the equipment, to have the equipment, be able to use the equipment from now on. Obviously, there's maintenance associated with that. I'm just looking at, for the future, if it makes sense to, farm this out and to outsource stuff as opposed to keeping stuff in-house. So I don't know if Mr. Simmons or
I
Mr.
can start, and then Mike, you can fill in as you need to. But this is, and we've talked about this in prior budget years, is a matter of resources. The Public Works crews already have a list of jobs and projects that are longer than they can get to. So adding something like this would take considerably more resources than we have, not just in terms of equipment, but in manpower. For example, if we were to keep this a fall program, keep in mind that our entire park crew, not only are they having to mow grass later in the year because it's warmer later in the year, but they're also having to pick up the leaves. So we don't have the crews. And then at the same time, the residents' expectation is going to be that the tree and the stump disappear at the same time. It's not one where the tree can go away and then months and months later the stump comes. So there is a little bit of service as part of it and convenience back to the resident.
There's also, correct me if I'm wrong, there's also training involved. I mean, not all township staff are trained and skilled in using a stump grinder or in removal of larger trees, correct?
Yeah, and if I may, Bill.
Yeah, please.
Most of these trees that are being condemned are very dangerous. There's overhead wires. So these gentlemen who are removing these trees, we're actually transferring the risk to them. They're licensed to work around power lines. We have underground utilities. It's their responsibility, as per Mr. Norsini's specifications, to make those PA1 calls and to assume all that liability. And they're right on the road as well, so they're stopping traffic. You need traffic engineers. So there's a lot that goes into this.
I think from our perspective is, we'd love to have a tree crew here that we could do pruning and stuff like that on our own and go about it. That would probably, some of the storms we've had recently where we see trees uprooted rather than break off or whatever is because, they're not pruned and we don't have the staffing or the equipment to do that kind of work. There's been talk, I know when Mr. Zankowski was here about adding a tree crew, and maybe, you know, when things get better economically, we should look at it. Because in the earlier days when I was here, we had our own tree men that went around and pruned and did that kind of stuff. I mean, if the economics are there and they want to, you know, you guys want to budget for it, we could add a few men and add a tree truck and go back to doing. That would be, I think, a great thing to look at in the future, that we wouldn't have to outsource so much stuff. But it all comes at a price, I think. Thank you.
Just one other quick thing. So these are just trees that have been identified to us as needing to come down. Somebody has called, or we've seen it ourselves. This is not, by any stretch of the imagination, an overall tree management program. This is just specific trees that have been identified. And
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. Yeah, I think, and we've talked about this in years past too, it's far from an actual tree management program. This is more of these have been identified and need to come down, kind of a reactionary type of program.
I will so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any additional commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. I will move for the remainder of the consent agenda, items A and D. Is there a second?
second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Moving on to committee reports. Item 4A, resolution number 2020-115, Eastern University Temporary Trailers Waiver of Land Development. I will so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Who wants to read us in on this?
I'll take that, Commissioner. So for Eastern University, like all the other learning institutions and businesses, is dealing with COVID-19. They're required by the COVID-19 regulations to install 2 temporary locker rooms to comply with the COVID-19 requirements. We did meet with them and go over this, and what came out of the meeting was to install the 2 trailers over existing parking lots. In that way, no new impervious is created. They're going to have to hook up to the sanitary sewer for them. So they're asking for a waiver of land development, and if you read our review letter, Gannett Fleming has no engineering objection to this, nor do I. And if this waiver gets granted, they'd still have to come in for a grading permit, so everything would be documented, and we would have plans for that. But there is the engineer from Eastern University, their consultant here, to lay out the plans if you wish and just go over that.
I'd like that.
Good evening. My name is Brendan Dorley from Associated Engineering Consultants. We're representing Eastern University. And like Steve said, Eastern is proposing 3 temporary trailers. 2 of them will be for locker rooms, and 1 of them will be for bathroom facilities, both men's and women's. They are being located in the parking lot near the gym and the soccer fields, because it would be for the athletics department. There is power nearby. There's a water main nearby that we can tap into, and just offside, adjacent to the parking lot, is the existing township sewer that we can tie into. We are, like Steve said, we're requesting the waiver for land development approval, but because this is a temporary condition and we're putting the trailers on existing asphalt, we're also requesting a waiver from stormwater management. And these trailers will be in place only as needed during the COVID situation we're going through right now.
Why are these needed for COVID? Why do you need locker rooms or bathrooms for COVID?
The athletic director is here tonight, so I'm going to pass it over to Eric McNally of Eastern University.
Thank you very much. To answer your question, Commissioner, the NCAA moved all of our competition dates to January in the spring semester. So we're going to have 21 teams competing at that point. Our COVID rules on campus, traditionally, our fans, spectators, or visiting teams would use restrooms in the residence life and the dorm rooms. Those are off limits to anybody from the outside, and even so much so that the athletes themselves and the students can't go dorm room to dorm room. They're confined to their building. So in order for us to compete with the 21 teams that we have, we only have currently 2 locker rooms that our teams would be able to use, and then we would need the external, so the visiting teams as they come, after they pass screening from their athletic training staff, once they arrive on campus, those are the only facilities they'll be allowed to use. So it's about safety for our community and our student athletes and our student at large.
So are we going to see every university? Why haven't we seen Villanova or others come in with this request?
I think theirs is more, they have the facilities to manage some of this. They don't have the setup we have where our restrooms are being used in our residence life, where the students are and their population, where we're trying to keep them safe. So it's more of a facility need. I can't speak to what Villanova's access is, but I'm pretty sure they have more than 2 locker rooms that they can utilize right now.
What's going to happen with all the parking you're taking up with these new buildings? Where does that parking go, and how's it going to affect the neighborhoods?
The situation with the parking is that during COVID, there's a reduced need for parking on the campus. So while these spaces, I think there's 23 in that row, are being taken away, there is no need for that parking during the time when the trailers will be on campus.
Will these facilities be anywhere near the neighbors or housing, or will they be seen from anyone's backyard? Front yard?
They're adjacent to Fairview Drive, which has a 120-foot setback from the right-of-way, and
Well, I see it's along Gulf Creek, right?
Gulf Creek is in between Fairview Drive and the parking lot, and it's heavily wooded in that area. I can't say if there's a peak that you could see through as you're driving by, but they are beyond the building setback line.
Steve, is that true? Are they beyond? Are they within the setback requirements?
Correct. So, Commissioner, when they submitted requesting the waiver for land development, they were still reviewed as if this was a regular land development application. And if you look at the letters, really it just talks about sanitary sewer. There's no issues. Again, from the stormwater management standpoint, it's existing impervious. They're on top of existing impervious. So we don't see any issues with this whatsoever.
Yeah, but the neighbors might. I'm looking, it looks like there could be at least one house. So can you give me a sense of the topography there? What's the elevation of these relative to the roadway and the homes along Fairview, as well as I think it's Cornwall, and there's Houston. So Houston all the way to the end, and then it says Cornwall, I guess. Is that what it says? Cornwall Circle? Yeah, Cornwall. And is there anything on Fairview? Is it down lower that people will be able to see from their homes?
From Houston and Cornwall, there's a lot of campus between there, and I don't believe anybody's going to be able to see those trailers from that far away. But from Fairview and Fenimore...
Well, but there won't be any trees, right? Because it's going to be the wintertime, we're going to be putting these up. So it's not like there's going to be, it's not all evergreens. There's a lot of deciduous trees. So
I would say it's a good 600 or 800 feet from the property line, from Cornwall and Houston. And I can't say if the neighbors have evergreen trees on their property as well, but I do know that Eastern does have some screening. If, to answer your question, for the topography near Fenimore and Fairview, it's basically at that same elevation. I believe the trailers are probably about 10 feet high. There's steps into them So, I mean, they're trailers, so
Right.
probably 2 or 3 feet off the ground above the wheels. But other than that, I don't think there's expansive headroom, so.
Well, see, it's along the creek there. It's at the low point in the area. And you're asking us to waive land development. So you're asking to say, hey, don't let anybody look at this. Let's put us these things in. So these are 40-foot by 12-foot trailers? How wide are these 3 trailers?
They are 10 feet, and the locker room trailers are 46 feet long, and the bathroom trailer is 44 foot long.
10 feet wide, 44 feet long, 10 feet high, 3 of them. It's big. It's like a train. It's like a train. You know, I think that we ought to make sure that somebody goes and looks at this so that the neighbors can. I think just to approve this is kind of premature, Steve. No, somebody ought to take a look. I understand it's on pavement. It's a necessity for the NCAA based on Eastern's operational conditions. But you got to take into consideration the neighbors. So we can't just, my view, we can't just say, go ahead and do it without the neighbors having any look. We got to give them a chance, especially because it'll be wintertime and those trees will, a lot of them are going to be bare for the wintertime. So I don't think it's a right thing. I never think it's a right thing to waive land development. I'd consider it in this case, but you got to give the people, you haven't talked to any of the neighbors at all, right? I don't think. Yeah, nobody. I haven't heard. And I might hear. Sometimes I hear from Eastern. You know, whoever the there's an outreach. There's a community guy that they have. At least they used to. But we can't spring this on the neighbors, right? It's a big 3 big units. Probably's okay, but let's make sure and let's not spring it on them. That's what I'm asking you.
And I'll agree with Commissioner Booker on that. I don't believe that anything can be done if there's not proper communication with the neighbors in terms of what's coming, where they're going to be, and at least what the vision is in terms of sight lines and stuff. You know, if it's truly not going to be a problem, there shouldn't be anything. But there's got to be some type of communication with the neighbors bordering there.
Somebody should set up like a balloon. We did this at Ardrossan and other and even on Eastern for the dorms. Set up, make sure, take a look at it, drive around, make sure that it's, you know, outline it so you can model it, and then make sure that it's not going to be obtrusive to any of the neighbors.
Commissioners, perhaps we could ask Mr. Dorley to do a couple, not a couple, but as many as needed, some lines of sight profiles based on the elevation, top elevation of the trailer and the surrounding homes. That way there's no subjectivity to, I saw the balloon, I didn't see the balloon. We'll know exactly. Is that something the applicant would be willing to do?
I'd be okay with that if they can do it, but I'm not trying to be difficult. In other words, I'm trying to foresee problems with the neighborhood and then remedy that before it becomes a problem.
And to that point, what I was kicking around in my mind would be to go to the corner and take pictures into the property from the public right-of-way and see what the perspective is and how much blocking there is, and that would be another thing that I could provide.
Yeah, this backs up to a pond, doesn't it? There's not
Yes, the
neighbors that
pond
are across the
is-
street.
The pond is south of that, right here.
So
There are neighbors here and here.
Behind that pond still are.
And also in Fairview, so it's along the creek.
I guess my issue is that this is specifically designed to address the needs of the university and athletics during the time of COVID, right? My concern with this is the federal government and our president have no plan. We don't know how long COVID is going to last, and that's becoming abundantly clear over the last couple weeks. And it's not like we're saying this could just be, you know, the next couple months or one season. We don't know, and that's the red flag that jumps out for me.
I'm wondering also if there's, if there is a concern they might be seeing, and I certainly, would sympathize with that. It's, that it can be very large, and I'm sure they're white or beige or whatever. So I'm just wondering, have you planned, are there any aesthetics that you've planned? Like, would you put some trees, it was certainly not permanent, but any, like potted trees or anything around it that might make it look, a little more aesthetically pleasing to anyone that might see it?
We
If
have
that's-
not, but it is directly adjacent to the wooded area along the creek. I mean, the creek is not a bare creek. It's tree lined and shrubs and all that, so it's not,
Yeah, our-
it's really not out in the open. It is tucked into the corner of the parking lot, and
I think after Commissioner Booker's concern is the winter. We didn't think that far ahead. We thought it's covered. If we would put it there now, no one would see it because we have plenty of overgrowth around it. Behind that creek is still our campus and a dorm room that's there, so no one really would ever see this. So the winter would be, I guess, for the pictures to be taken. But
It may be fine. It may be fine, but let's check it. So
So Commissioner, my suggestion, if this so pleases the board, we'll let the applicant come back at the next meeting. They can do a combination of what they feel they need to show this board, whether it be pictures, lines of sight, elevation lines, to show you. Do you think, Mr. Dorley, you could do that by our next meeting?
yes, I would be able to do, to your point, but the topography across the creek to Fairview and Fenimore is basically level. So the biggest thing there would be the tree mass that might back. So that, in my mind, pictures here might be better. But for the Cornwall and Houston, I could do a cross-section of the campus across there, and that would
And
help.
whatever you think you know to make sure the commissioners have whatever information they need to make a good decision on this.
I'm also hearing that it would be good for us to add to the resolution a provision that this would last for 1 year without prejudice to your right to reapply, just so these don't become the permanent trailers that the college has. I understand this is intended to be temporary, but I think that we'd like to just make sure that it doesn't become permanent.
How time sensitive is this? I mean, what's your,
January 1.
you need
when
it
we're
January
approved to
1,
start
and how long is it going to take you to get this set up and tap into the sewer line?
Jeff Gromas, I believe you have spoken.
The facilities director, Jeff Gromas, is here. I don't know if he can answer that on the lead time of the trailers.
the trailers ordered, are they on site, or they have to be ordered?
Yeah, they'd have to be ordered. I would say if we have a 2.5 to 3 month lead time, we can probably accomplish this. It's going to be tight, but we could do it. Obviously, I'm going to sit here and tell you the more time I have, the better. But I think that's reasonable.
Okay, and then,
But if it got much beyond that, I don't think we could accomplish it.
and when COVID is over, quote unquote, to Commissioner Enderle's point, you'll remove the trailers and cap off the sewer line, is that correct?
Absolutely right.
Okay.
With respect to the trailers, are they going to have any footing, or are they going to be anchored with like a trailer anchor, which is just driven into the ground?
I don't have the details on the actual trailers just yet.
They're just going to sit on the pavement, though, basically.
That would be the expectation. Nothing that would at all indicate that they would be permanent. Obviously, we have to do enough work on there to make sure that they're going to withstand any weather conditions or thing we'll deal with, but nothing at all that would secure them to the ground that they'd be placed on.
Can you move to table this to the next scheduled meeting?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion to table passes unanimously. Guys, we will see you next time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Moving to item 4B, resolution number 2020-106, Conestoga Road Tunnel Lighting, approval for change order number 1, Wampole Miller in the credit amount of $13,442, and change order number 1 for Gannett Fleming in the amount of $10,700. Steve, did I read that right? We are net saving money on this?
That's correct, Commissioner, at this time. So Wampole Miller has provided some value engineering from the time this was bid with some cost-saving equipment. But to that end, we had considerably more review time from Gannett Fleming, which incurred costs. The net is still a savings of $2,742 on that.
I will so move. Is there a second? Is there any
Second.
commissioner comment?
Yeah, so this is Ward 7, and I did talk to the engineer. So yeah, it seems good. You're saying that we'll net savings of about 2,000, and this should not add any more time, correct?
That's correct. The only thing that's adding time, Commissioner, as we discussed, is working through the PennDOT detour. That's been taking some time.
Okay. But overall, saving money is good, so thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment? I'll call the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item 4C, Resolution Number 2020-87, authorizing an electronics and paper shredding event to be hosted by Radnor Township. I will so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Who wants to read us in on this?
I'll give it a shot, Mr. President. This was on our, I believe it was our August agenda, and we had, the board had asked us to go back and ask a couple additional questions specific to our relationship with Curb My Clutter, who has now become Retrieve. So we did that. We met with representatives from Retrieve. We learned that the township and then Curb My Clutter had entered into a one-year agreement, kind of a trial agreement is how it was labeled, and that agreement expired in November of 2019. So for 2020, we've been out of contract with them. They are interested in renewing. However, they are not interested, and it's kind of outside of their purview to host an event like this. So while as a separate piece of legislation, once we have the terms worked out with Retrieve, we brought this back in front of the board for your consideration. I think the argument made, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, the argument was being made that we have a relationship with a company that would take televisions and electronic items. Why would the township incur an expense to offer the same thing? It's a good question. It was one that I was learned a little bit on. With the Curb My Clutter agreement, it actually costs the resident anywhere from, I think there's two different tiers depending on the size of the television. And based on the size of most televisions today, given their price, is that for the overwhelming majority of folks looking to recycle a television, it was going to be close to $100. So that's going to be the biggest point of difference between the service offered by Retrieve versus what the township has historically offered with this event, in that this is an opportunity for residents to dispose of those items at no cost to them, while the township does incur the cost. So we brought it back to the board tonight, and I would recommend it just from the standpoint that this has been a wildly popular program, to the point where it's been aggravating for the nearby neighborhoods in terms of traffic control on that day. I would anticipate, and this is just pure speculation, but with folks being home this year, there might be a few more electronics laying around the house, monitors that have been replaced, probably upgraded so their kids' eyes aren't going crossed. But having an opportunity for folks to recycle those things and get rid of them at no cost, even under normal terms, has been popular. So I would anticipate this year being popular as well. We did call a couple of companies. The $12,000 price tag is reasonable to what folks are willing to offer. So we feel like the $12,000 price is fair based on what the market's going to charge us for that. It's a flat rate. So hopefully we get a ton of folks that want to come out and participate, which would ultimately lower our per unit price. And then we also offer the shred event, which even if the board doesn't want to do the electronic piece of it, hopefully we can consider the shred piece separately, because that, first of all, it's much cheaper in terms of hiring the company to come in and do it. And second of all, there's a lot of folks that take advantage of that too. So we brought it back for the board tonight. We're still shooting for an late October timeframe. We would need your approval tonight to get everything in place and start working on the logistics of planning out that day. And I think I covered it.
Is there any commissioner comment?
Yes, I would like to. I'm going to vote for this. I think it is a great event. I've used it in the past. I've also started to notice that the Wednesday open truck, the bulk pickup, I'm seeing people put electronics out because there's nothing else to do with them. So I would really love to see the residents of Radnor take advantage of something like this so that we're keeping that kind of thing out of the landfill. And so this will have my vote, and I will be in line with all of the things I've been cleaning out of my basement.
Is there any staff comment?
Jack, I just have one comment, and to speak to the slide that's up. We may not be in partnership with Retriever at the moment, but I mean, I've had neighbors call them, and I think they're still picking up. So if you have, to your point, if you have electronics laying around, call them. I believe they're still picking up, and in the year that we partnered with them, I think this shows that the partnership is a success. Over 13,000 pounds of electronics, which added with the 4,000 pounds of clothing, which would end up in the landfill, it's a net gain for the township. Marginal, but still probably in those amounts we're looking at $300-400 in benefit to the township. So I'm still opposed to holding this for the electronics because we can pass a resolution extending our partnership, and I don't know that it's the township's responsibility to be paying to recycle people's TVs. If we have a partnership and someone's buying a $4,000 TV, I think $100 to recycle it is a realistic cost. So I'm still opposed to having the recycling event.
Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment? Hearing none, I will call the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes 6-1. Moving on to Resolution 4D, Resolution Number 2020-97, authorizing receipt of sealed bids for the Morris Road Streetscape Enhancement Project. I will so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Bill, do you want to read us in on this?
I can provide a little bit of the history. This is a project that goes back years, where the residents have been highly involved with my predecessor and with Steve Norsini and the commissioner. It consists of a complete streetscape for Morris Road. In terms of the township's planning leading us up to this point, we've included it in the 2019 borrowing, which is the source of funds for the project, and we've also approved the engagement for the engineering of it, which leads us to tonight, where we now have those documents and are ready to go out for sealed bids. I can let Steve get into a little bit more of the details of what the actual project will consist of.
Thank you, Mr. White. So for those who are familiar with Morris Road, the project consists of removal and replacement of all the sidewalk, curbing, and driveway aprons on the street. It also includes removing the existing declining cherry trees and other cherry trees. So there's 43 being removed, and it's proposed that 49 be installed. There's actually an add alternate for this project because within the borrowing we can do concrete curb. At this time, our consultant prices the granite curb considerably out of our budget, so we'll bid it with an add alt. We'll get both prices if so pleases the board to bid this project. So in general, this is a streetscape enhancement project. Again, if you've been down the street, we had one meeting on the street with the residents, and I believe we had two here in the Radnor Shire room. Commissioner Abel convened we had a Zoom town hall on the meeting where Carroll Engineering presented the project and stepped through the slides. It did go to Shade Tree Commission. also. The overwhelming, so the residents who live there have voted overwhelmingly through a poll to have the cherry trees. The project is budgeted in the GOB at $800,000. We're near that with construction costs, inspection, and contingency. But again, the bidding climate will tell us the real price if it so pleases the board to go out to bid. So I don't know if you have any other questions. We have John Hosback here, myself, but I will end at that.
Is there any commissioner comment?
All right, I'll start. So back when we voted on the bond issue on this in 2019, I said that I would approve that the bond. I thought there were many projects in it that, based on the criteria that we put together at the time, which was around safety, in projects that dealt with safety, projects that were going to be matching funds for grants that we had already received. And there was a third criteria, and I cannot remember it for the life of me. But you know, I thought did a good job with all of the projects, vetting those and deciding, along with the township, what would be the best to put into the bond. And when we voted, I said that I was going to approve it, even though I wasn't thrilled with every project. And this was the project I was not thrilled with. So Morris Road is certainly a beautiful street. I've walked down it. I know that the sidewalks are not in the best condition, which is certainly a problem across the township. So back in August of 2019, we started a conversation as a township around what we need to do, the responsibility of the township when it comes to the maintenance of street trees, as well as our responsibility when it comes to the sidewalks across the township that have been damaged due to township trees in the right-of-way under the ordinance related to street trees. So my concern around this project is I feel like it's coming before we make a decision around what we want to do as a township when it comes to maintaining street trees and when it comes to maintaining our sidewalks. There are many areas in the township where the sidewalks do need repair. There are many areas of the township where our street trees we need a comprehensive plan to manage the street trees. And we all know that that is something that we have not done as a township well for many, many, many years. So I'm concerned that, putting this project out there and doing that before we have a plan as a township sets a precedent that, how do we respond to other streets and areas that come to us and want us to do this. My other concern is I sat in on the Shade Tree meeting last week, and they did approve this, but with some concerns that were raised around a monoculture. I've had other people reach out to me about the idea of planting a monoculture there and the township footing the bill for that. If one tree gets diseased, all of the trees could go, and then an over $600,000 project, could go up in smoke. So, I do have a concern about that as well. I would not be opposed to this project in taking down, I believe there's 18 trees that are dead right now or dying. I know that the idea is that some of the trees that are there now are, starting to come to the end of their useful life. Some might argue that I'm about to come to the end of my useful life. Will you get rid of me? My husband might, but. So, I think that cutting those trees down is problematic, and we know that things like that in this township are problematic. So there is that, and I would like to, so I would be not opposed to that. I would not be opposed to fixing the curbing and things like that. But with regards to sidewalks and driveway aprons and things like that, I wonder why, the township, until we decide as a township we're going to foot the bill for that for everyone, why would we foot it for one block in the township? Because there are many places in the township where there are trees that are in the right-of-way that have destroyed the sidewalk. So those are my concerns. Again, I'd be willing if this project was scaled back, but not in the, not for over $500,000 right now.
I was not here when this was approved, but my question when I was reading through this over the last couple of days was exactly that. Not so much on the trees, which I understand. My question was, why are we replacing sidewalks? And I wondered that simply because there are many places in the Third Ward, specifically on Meadowbrook, on St. David's, Midland, Windermere, where I've been approached by homeowners with questions around what the township is doing to fix their sidewalks. At the same time, when we purchased our home on Midland 4 years ago, the previous homeowner was required to right the sidewalks where the trees and roots had lifted it up. More recently, just last spring, the neighbor across the street, in order to sell their home, was required, and Bud who works for the township, came out and did it as a side project to replace those, and I understand does that very frequently. So that was the question that popped in my mind, was why this project as opposed to others, and I'm just wondering, do we have a plan holistically as a township in terms of dealing with sidewalk replacement when there are trees that are lifting up that are either township trees or privately owned trees? And I was just curious as to that, not having the full background on this issue.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commissioner Enderle. So this is a standalone project. I'm not aware of any comprehensive plan that you've noted regarding sidewalk or other streets similar to this. This project was brought forth as a standalone from the previous administration.
So I'll say, I think that Lisa is absolutely right on the substance of everything that she has said, and I would like to vote in exactly the way that she described. The problem that I have is that we negotiated a fairly delicate detente on how we were going to whack up the bond proceeds, and this was one of the projects that we said that we would follow through with. Moira, Damien, you weren't on the board at the time. You didn't make that promise. You don't have any obligation to follow through with it, but one of the problems that we have is that as we get other large bonds in and we whack up projects going forward, if the rule becomes that the projects that we think we had agreed to at the time are no longer locked in, and future boards and future board members can say that they're not going to follow through, then I have very little incentive to either A, pick a project that is important to me but that will not be done until later. If I can grab the money and do it now, that makes a lot more sense, which of course is short-term thinking that I don't like. And also it makes me far less comfortable agreeing to projects that are important to everybody else. Ideally, we would all think of the entirety of the township first, although actually I'm not sure that that is ideal because we've made the decision we're going to have wards. None of us are at large. We all operate for the benefit of our constituents, in addition to thinking of the township at large, and we have an obligation to push for them. And that's exactly what happened with this bond issue.
So this was, just a question, this was agreed upon by the board as one of the projects that was in there, or at least there was some agreement in terms of the fact that this project was in there, included in the bond.
Do you want to go?
So, correct. When we voted on the bond, so, and to your comment on the delegate detente, I guess is what you said, certainly that was the case. The bond included projects for every ward except for my ward and Ward 5 at the time. And I voted on the bond because I felt that those projects that were included in there were important. I did say at the time that I was not thrilled with every project. This project was one of them. I questioned our bond counsel at the time that if we, and it was quite clearly made quite clear to us at the time that every project would still have to come to us for approval. And I'm not saying nix the project. I am suggesting scaling back the project. And at the time, I asked bond counsel, and they said that we could, we couldn't fundamentally change everything that was in there, but we could, tweak things a little bit. And I would suggest tweaking this, pulling it back, and then, perhaps there's a project. I mean, we've got a capital plan of over, what did I think I said it at our last meeting, millions that are of unfunded capital. So is it scale this back slightly and put something else in addition to this and get a little more bang for our buck? We're about to have a presentation for the safety system for the bridge over on King of Prussia Road, something that we talk about all the time. So is that something we could put in? And I don't know, Mr. White, I'm going to ask you, is that something that we could potentially do if we scaled one thing back and found some savings, or scaled the project back smaller? Could we put something else in there?
Yeah, and I'll qualify this by saying that we would want to get an absolute answer from bond counsel, because I don't like to play bond counsel. But my recollection of those conversations and in the history with bond projects generally is that the definition of the projects to be completed within the bond language itself is generic enough that it's any infrastructure or capital related project that has a useful life in a similar length of time as what is originally contemplated should be okay. So yes, I mean, the board could do that with any one of the projects that were borrowed for in 19 that we haven't completed yet, where the cash is still available. It could be reassigned. The one thing, if I could offer the board, and I think we're going to hear a little bit of this on Wednesday night when we talk more specifically about stormwater, is my experience through the years here is that we don't have any problem coming up with projects, which is why we have such a long list of capital projects, almost all of which is unfunded. Our problem usually breaks down in the execution and the installation of the project itself. And yes, in a perfect world, in a world hopefully we can get to in the years coming, is where things are planned out, and we do have a plan for sidewalks and a plan for stormwater and sanitary sewer. But as it exists now, we don't. This is a project that was discussed and moved forward through all the various stages, and we're here. If we don't do this, it's just one more back onto the list of unfunded things for reconsideration. So the nice thing about moving forward, albeit in a little bit more of an ad hoc approach, is that it's one project that is done. And again, I'm not necessarily talking about Morris specifically. I'm thinking more broad-based. And again, we'll probably hear this Wednesday night. Is there's no way to attack all the stormwater projects. So if there's an opportunity to get the big ones done and plan for that, moving forward may make the most sense in getting those off the list so that you can refocus on what is still on the list. And there was probably a more elegant way to word that, but hopefully my point got.
Also, I would add to that, Bill, as someone who did serve as bond counsel for several years prior to leaving private practice, we put together a list of projects with the bond. The bondholders believe that that's the list of projects we're going to build. If you do take a project off, it needs to meet those criteria, but there also is an amendment. You can't just you can't say to the public market, we're going to borrow money for this and then spend it on something completely different. Now, we can argue about what's material and what's not, but Bill and I don't want to argue with bondholders or bond counsel. So I think that it's not just, take this off, reduce it, put something else on. It'll have to be documented. It'll have to be cleared. And I don't think it's going to be that easy to do. aside from that, this project was agreed upon as part of we borrowed the money for it. The plans are all here by Carroll Engineering, and we agreed to do it. I guess if you're concerned about the monoculture of the trees, well, then say that and make it, you can maybe change the trees on this, but I don't think it's the right thing to go out, put this as a project, issue bonds, and then say, no, we don't want to do that after all, when there's not something extraordinary. The money's there, the project's there. We have to spend the money within 3 years under IRS rules, so you can't make material changes in these things. If we didn't want it in the bond, it needed to not be in the bond issue. But since it was, we should follow through with it. It's good practice. It's the public relies on that. The bondholders and the financial markets rely on these being accurate documents. We should move forward with this. It's got nothing to do with the overheight vehicle detection system.
I have a couple questions. So, I'm sorry, Commissioner Boraski, are you done? Okay. So, getting back to just a couple projects that we've had, the lights on Route 30, there was supposed to be some kind of special light system. We pulled that. That was on a bond. Am I correct on that? Here, can you
Yeah,
just
we
give it-
borrowed for that, and it's still there and available.
But we're probably not going to do that project, correct?
Well,
It
it
just-
would, to Commissioner Booker's point, it would take an act of the board
Okay.
to pivot away from that. It's just a matter of getting to the project from a resource
Okay.
standpoint, and we had a setback with the grant denial.
Sure, because I thought we were going to funnel some of that money into the County Line Road project.
Bill just said it was a grant issue.
We just approved the County Line Road project with,
But, but I thought if we need extra
Yeah,
money, some money would come from that, am I correct?
Yeah, so we had talked about way back in January, February, when the Montrose project, and there were a couple along County Line that were part of the same study of identifying funds to do those projects. I had suggested that was one alternative. Ultimately, the feedback from various commissioners was that was a no-go.
Okay.
So we came up with a plan that the board actually approved last meeting.
Okay, then I have another question. Rich, the lights for King of Prussia Road by Eastern University, was that a bond issue, or was that just a grant? Was there some money in the bond for that?
Yeah, there was the township share through the bond, and then
Okay,
the
so we
grant.
Was that in there, or was it was 182,000, but it was a partnership with Eastern, and then the majority of it was a grant? I don't remember that being in the bond.
Yeah, well, yes. So everything you said with regard to the grants and the partnership with the other universities is true, but for the township share, it was included as part of the bond.
Okay, so that's part of a bond. I just want to make sure that everybody is on par here. And then the Willows, did we ever borrow money from a bond to fix the Willows, or is that just earmarked?
Yeah, no, so those are, no part of the Willows funding came from any bond.
Okay,
Those
so
were all
it never came from a
township
bond?
sources, right.
Okay, but that was a prior board's decision to fund the Willows. All right, so for me, I think what Commissioner Borowski said makes the most sense. I mean, we're in different times right now, and if we can fix something without going the platinum route, then I would be for it. If we could, if we could even refund some of this money, I would be for that too. Some of the bond money, just keep adding on something where we don't necessarily have the money, and I don't know how our budget's going to look this year, but I think that if we're not all committed to this, I think we should at least take a step back and see where we are when it comes to the budget. Because if we don't need to spend all that to fix this, I think that may make the most sense. So listening to what Commissioner Borowski said, taking a step back, I think that's going to be make the most sense, and I don't think that we need to vote on this now either. So I would like to hear a little bit more before I would say yes to this.
So Commissioner Farhi, just to clarify, we do have the money for it. I mean, the money is in the
The
bond.
money's in the
So-
construction fund,
Yeah,
sitting
I
there.
know
we
that.
do have the money for it. my question is more around the precedent for this. I would personally like to see this to be less, and I did ask that question when we approved the bond, if we could, in some way, if we decided not to do a project or something became not, no longer feasible for whatever reason, and they did say that we could do that. I'm not trying to torpedo the entire project. I'm wondering if the project could be scaled back a bit, and if then there was something else we could include. I just feel like without us having an overall, whether it's the bond or not, and I hear what Commissioner Booker is saying and Mr. White, and Commissioner Larkin around, we borrowed the money, this is what people are expecting us to spend it on. I don't know that people are necessarily expecting us to spend it on, specific projects. But I think that people will expect if other sidewalks are fixed, why isn't their sidewalk being fixed? And then we're in a position where we don't have any information to give them, and we don't have a plan, and we don't have, we haven't talked about the trees, and we haven't, so I feel like, if anything, if this is a precipitous for that, if we could say, well, if we're going to do this project and we're going to invest the money in, for me, this is one block. I feel like then I'm not even saying there are projects in my ward. I'm thinking projects all over the township, or even things that the township building needs, or whatever. I just would have liked to have seen maybe it not be such a specific concentration on one area. But I would like to see some sort of broader conversation around how we are going to look at this across the township for the future, because, I just don't think it can be a one-off.
I agree with Commissioner Borowski in terms of the need for a holistic view at a look at these projects across the township. I'll be very frank. I am going to vote for it simply because I'm worried. I'm worried about what the precedent is in terms of other projects that come on future bond issues that concern my ward and the residents within my ward, and the projects that I know need to get done and delivered. And if this board previously had agreed to this, whether the full scope of the project was scoped out and known at the time, but the board voted on action. It was included in the bond, and I believe that we need to do right by it and move projects along. I think that this board should be a board of action one way or the other. No offense, but Commissioner Farr, he wanted to table again for, I think, the second or third time something in a meeting that concerned me last, that concerned the generators last time. And I understand the need for thoughtful discourse and consideration, but we should be a board of action in these times.
I'd just like to throw in that I also agree that the board, before I was on it, obviously debated and were thoughtful about passing what was in the bond, so I will respect that. We are at the stage of just approving the bids. I would just ask that when we're having those negotiations with the bids, that we look at all the possibilities of what this project could look like. It looks like there are plans already drawn up, but maybe there's new information, or maybe there's another way to go about it. So I would just ask that we request the RFP be to provide some alternate ideas about how to achieve what is needed on that street. But I will honor the board, the previous board, and the bond issue.
Well, I appreciate Commissioners Enderle, Larkin, and Mulroney for their comments, particularly Commissioners Enderle and Mulroney for supporting the will of the last board when we voted to include this in the bond, which passed by a 6-1 vote, if my memory serves me correct. And just to go back through the process, which was described a little bit earlier, this has probably been one of the most transparent processes for a project since I've been on the board in 4 years. It started on an October night in 2018 with a town hall meeting on the street of Morris Road. Close to 50 residents were out there, which is, if not the entire street, the vast majority of the street. And there was a great discussion, some for, some against, some just there to learn. Over the next several months, there was a lot more discussion amongst the neighbors to where we got to a point where the neighbors bought in and they thought this was a great project to go forward. The previous township manager made it very clear these trees were put in there by the township. They weren't the right trees. The sidewalks have been uplifted. They're a security or a safety issue for the residents. The curbing is kicked out, so residents who don't have driveways can no longer park in those areas. So it becomes a safety issue, which goes back to the previous comment about the criteria that we let out for what projects we want to include in this bond. So not doing this project now, we have residents who have small kids, and when I drive down Morris Road, those kids aren't passing on their bikes over the sidewalks. They're now having to go over the curb, in some places over routes, and go onto Morris Road with trucks and heavy traffic. That's probably one of the most trafficked streets in the township, especially without question in Ward 6. So, when I remember the residents coming out to the meeting upstairs and everyone speaking in support of the project, and then this board saying, yes, we agree, this project's a good one, we're going to push it forward. Then it came back before this board earlier this year where we wanted to move forward on it, and it again passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. And then we get to this point where now we have people saying it's not a good project and we never liked it. I just, it falls flat with me, and I respect the members up here who are able to keep their word and keep the vote of the previous board to move forward on this, and I appreciate that. And with that, I'll yield back to the president.
Okay. I will say, I think Lisa's been pretty consistent about her position on this. I've obviously said my piece about it, but it's not like she's changing her mind here. That being said, is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment? I see a lot of public comment.
Sarah Pilling, 29 Garrett Avenue. Very concerned about climate change and the health and the survival of trees. Why I more than acknowledge that Morris Road is really pretty when the existing Kwanzan cherries are in bloom. That's about 10 days a year. And cherries are notoriously vulnerable to disease. Many of them are grafted, so the graft can break down. They also get borers, and they're short-lived. They're not a good-looking tree, and they're not really hardwood, so you can get limb breakage. I really object to a monoculture of Osaka cherries to do the same thing, because they're not going to last. It's not good for the environment. And I understand why the beauty of the street for that 10 days is paramount, but I think we need to think of 12 months and of climate change and of survival of trees. So I really think that a monoculture is a very, very poor decision horticulturally. Thank you.
Mr. President, if I may, can I speak on behalf of the monoculture and how it came about? Thank you. So the previous administration, as Jake pointed out, we had a couple of town hall meetings. We had a couple of meetings here, and we also had a Zoom meeting. We designed the original intent to provide 7 different species to be chosen for the streetscape. Different coloring, sizes, compatibility, urban resistance. The previous administration asked, actually polled the residents, and it came back almost, I think it was a 98% vote that the residents want to see the cherry species palette put back into place, just because of the color and what Sarah was just referring to, the 10 days of beautiful color. We weighed out very heavily, and the township was not an advocate for the monoculture at any time. This was the objective of the residents. We weighed the pros and cons out, talked about epidemics such as emerald ash borer and different blights that we're seeing today. And we weighed them out very heavily and precisely. But at the end of the day, they came back to us requesting unanimously pretty much that they want the cherry selection. So I just wanted to give you some insight on that.
Well, can I follow up with one question to John? So John, in the last, and this came up in the last Zoom call meeting where we were going through the final plans, and I in fact raised a question about a monoculture, and your assessment was the monoculture would survive on Morris Road, wouldn't be susceptible, in your professional opinion, wasn't susceptible, and the number 49 is not what concerns you. If it was, say, 150, there would be a different story.
So, Jake, the question actually was to me, am I concerned about a monoculture? We're always concerned about a monoculture. They asked me, will this work? And I believe the species of cherry that we have selected, the Okami cherry, if any selection was to be chosen, the Okami cherry would be the best fit for that area and the urban streetscape of Morris Road. That's what the residents wanted. That's what they pitched back to us. So we were, at that time with the previous administrative, we were supporting their request. That was the species that was selected.
Hello, my name's Eileen Brett. I am chair of the Shade Tree Committee, and so I want to speak on that behalf as well as just being a taxpayer. So one, thank you for approving a bond, any bond, that's going to put more trees in this township regardless of which street it is, so thank you. However, with regards to the monoculture and the residents, I think it's understandable why the residents selected it. It is indeed beautiful to have a cherry-lined street. I think my street would do the same. However, the residents, I am guessing, are probably busy people with families and not certified arborists. They're probably not landscape architects. So I think we should, my request to you is to pause on approving this. I agree with what the commissioners are saying, and I think if it were to come back to the Shade Tree Committee, we could come up with a better plan, one that still gives the residents a beautiful cherry-lined street, but includes some biodiversity. We could also look at not planting all 49 trees in what they call the Hell Strip, which is the small area in between the street and the sidewalk. So I think we could increase the probability of success if we could diversify there as well. You may ask, well, why in the world did we approve it as the Shade Tree Committee? And I think in general, my colleagues, they're looking to honor the residents' wishes. Okay? Second, we have a high degree of trust and a very collaborative relationship with Steve and John.
Well,
and I think third, we didn't follow the process. So the same requirements that we make businesses and residents adhere to, we didn't do this past Wednesday night when we looked at this plan. But I think if we did, we would have more time to see where exactly they're going, and we could come up with some alternate ideas. So my overall request is that you pause on approving this. As a taxpayer, I would just say I do think it sounds like a little bit of a slippery slope when we talk about repairing sidewalks, and putting driveway aprons in. And I think, Jake, to your point, you could say that about numerous neighborhoods, that they're not safe for kids to bike down the street because of the sidewalks. I think we have that in many places. So for me, I would just want it to be transparent. Why did we pick this street over other streets? So thank you.
Well, again, I think because of the township planted those trees in the first place, right? So it's really just maintaining what was there, correct? Is that right?
Well, Correct, and it was the previous administration who told the residents on the street that it was the township's responsibility to take care of it.
Public comment?
And President Larkin, just one point of order. You know, I respect the chair of the Shade Tree Committee, but I don't think she was given permission or authority to speak for the full board. So, I mean, those comments on why they took action on August 16th or September 16th, I mean, that's conjecture.
I understand. She made clear that she was not representing the majority when she told us what the majority had said. So I understood her to be speaking for herself in her role as a person who was associated with the Shade Tree and not at the direction of the Shade Tree Committee. But I think that's a point that's well taken. Public comment, sorry.
Good evening, that's fine. My name is Michelle Finister. I'm one of the residents on Morris Road to which you are hoping to do this project. First off, I really want to appreciate and thank Commissioner Abel, Mr. Norsini, and John for preparing us for what is hopefully to come on our street. We as a group met, and yes, there were some doubts as to how this may come along, but as we discussed it further as neighbors, as friends, as a community, we sat there and we said, this needs to be done to our street. I fully understand where Lisa is coming from, and I do get it. I do understand that this is a lot of money to put in, and why should there be the aprons and everything? When I tell you that I look at our street every day and I see kids coming down it, they're riding their skateboards in the street over the low-speed humps. We have people that are coming down the street at 45 miles an hour from literally the stop sign. I looked at the last 2 tropical storms that we had, and the number of branches that were coming down off these trees alone were just ridiculous. And some of them were fairly huge, to the point where they could have, but thankfully did not, snap any of our power lines. I mean, I see them every day, and they're not in good shape. And I understand, you know, that as the Shade Tree Commission pointed out, this may not be the greatest tree to put in. We as a community, when these trees were first put in, they were absolutely gorgeous. They were blooming. They were, you know, fantastic to come down. Now we're lucky if we see, you know, a little bit of an overhang. Yes, maybe for 10 days. But there has been times when we have seen this come around for almost 3-4 weeks in terms of the blooming, when they were fresh, when they were new, when they were beautiful. Now we're looking at different possibilities at this point, and I understand if anything needs to be cut back, we've been well prepared. We've been told, hey, you may not get your granite curbing. You may have to settle for cement. We're prepared for that. We answered a bunch of questions. We were, asking questions about, are we going to be informed, as to what times, during the construction, are we going to be informed? Yes, we are. I feel that as a street, we are well prepared for this to happen. And I pray that, the commissioners feel, for most of you, that this is a way to go. I understand that there are more properties in Radnor Township that are in need of more repair, the sidewalks being done and anything like that. But when I watch kids, elderly people can't even walk on our street, and they're walking in the street, that's where it's even more dangerous. And our curbs have been damaged so much, as many have been in Radnor Township, by the plow trucks, by the construction trucks which are currently working our streets. Ours very much so right now. These are just things, if you have the bond, I pray, I give you the wisdom to please move forward with it. As I'm the only resident here that was able to make it tonight, I pray, please, let it move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I will call the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to 4E, resolution.
Can I just add one thing? I would like this to precipitate a conversation about the sidewalks in this township and how the township is dealing with that, and the trees. And I know that at the Shade Tree Commission meeting, Mr. Golis and Mr. Gibbons, who sit on the shade tree, said that they had put together a white paper, and Mr. Norsini, I think they mentioned this, were you still there, and Mr. Hosbeck?
They've done a
to help us
huge
start
amount
that
of work.
conversation, and I would like us to have that conversation.
Item 4E, Resolution 2020-101, authorizing purchase of high water detection warning systems in the amount of $24,900 and associated PennDOT TE 160. I will so move. Is there a second? Okay. Mr. Norsini, could you walk us into this?
Thank you, Commissioner. Sorry. So what's before you tonight is for water-activated signs that will say whatever we wish them to say. The sign would say, let's, for instance, high water, flood waters, and there's a ring of lights around them. So what we have is what PennDOT calls a dynamic flood warning system on South Wayne Avenue. There would be one pedestal-mounted electric sign southbound South Wayne, northbound South Wayne, and also at Runnymede where it floods down by the memorial. There's also a repeater, as these signs talk, and one pedestal-mounted high water sensor. So this is a proposed turnkey operation where TAPCO would come in, install the foundations for all these pedestals, install the signals, the equipment themselves, and then make them all talk as they do. And if you look in the packet, there's a TAPCO, there's some information from TAPCO. So that's the sign there. This one says road flooded. As you can see, there's lights around the perimeter. They're solar powered.
Steve, just real quick, sorry, you're on page 66 of the packet, just in case.
Yes, I'm
anyone's
sorry.
searching.
Thank you, Mr. White. I'm on page 66 of the packet. There is a picture. It shows a road flooded, and it shows the various TAPCO signs. Again, the sign is at the commissioner's discretion. It is lighted or lit, and it is a turnkey project. The cost is $24,900. It is warranted. I will say, so in speaking with PennDOT, this requires their permission to install on South Wayne. So I can't make an actual application for that unless the board approves the associated TE 160. If so pleases the board to do so, we would make that application to PennDOT. And again, if it so pleases the board to purchase this system, if this is approved tonight, we would not order the system until we had full PennDOT approval. But as you know, South Wayne by the firehouse, right in there, one of the most notorious flooding areas in the township. There's been rescues by police there. It's pretty common. The Radnor Fire Company has some barricades and signs they'll put out for this. Public Works goes out there all the time. So this would be part of that.
And then
Thank you, Ian.
If I could jump on to the end of that, Steve, thank you for the summary. As I understand it, this is another one of those conversations that started some time ago, perhaps years ago. And the initial thought was that we could identify these places, or there are places around town that are consistent flooders where these signs might be beneficial. Given the cost, the discussion was narrowed down to the location that's in front of the board tonight as a kind of a test site. If it turns out that the commissioners and the residents are pleased with what the outcome is, which is hopefully cars not driving onto a flooded road, there are some other areas that we could consider putting this type of signage up. From my perspective in bringing it to you tonight, and we'll talk a little bit more about this with the next agenda item too. These are situations where we've been enduring them. There's certainly been times where we've had barricades on roads and cars go around them into the flooding waters. So I'm not sure this is going to absolutely solve the problem, but it's in terms of escalation, having blinking lights and something that'll maybe do a better job of grabbing your attention as you're driving, and maybe this will help maybe this will help. On the only downside, or the biggest downside from my perspective in bringing this to you tonight, is that it is costly. But as Steve laid out, it is pretty extensive, and it's a system that is interconnected and requires the engineering that comes with that interconnectivity. And so what we're hoping for, if the board approves tonight, is an opportunity to use that South Wayne area as a spot where we can warn people, especially at nighttime, to avoid driving down that road when the lights are flashing.
So if I could add to Mr. White, Ian, if you could page down to 68, the next page. One more, thank you. So that's basically what the 3 signs look like.
I have a question about what they look like. So what I'm seeing in the picture is that the sign will always be there saying road flooded. It's just, it's alerted by the lights, but it's not like it's an LED sign that comes up when there's flooding. It will always say road flooded, and it'll just be lit when it's dangerous.
That's correct. So it's a street sign that has LED lights surrounded by it that are activated when the sensor at what we set it at touches water. It sets off the 3 signs.
And is there any, from this company, I mean, is there any proven value that there are less cars that pass this sign than when it...
They don't have information, quantitative or qualitative information like that. Like, you know, I think Mr. White summed it up very well. This isn't going to stop cars from going in. It's an added measure, right? Because they go around barricades, they go through barricades, they go through caution tape, they go under caution tape. So this is another measure.
And it comes with that large box and the large solar panel. I mean, that's what it would look like, is the...
Pretty much. That solar panel for sure, and the box may vary, but at least one of them is going to have a box that large.
That picture taken down the shore?
Looks like it.
Yeah.
You know, without knowing that there's value to this, you know, I question whether, I don't know. I would like to know that these work before voting to install something that is big and flashing and...
Can I see the other pictures again? I'm sorry. It's not in the packet, right?
So to your
packet.
question,
Okay.
Maura, so we have a house down, we're in Sea Isle, and they have one of these right at the end of our street. And it does work. There are a couple times this summer when it has worked. Now, to Mr. Norsini's point, people still drive through the water and get stuck at the intersection. But they're big. I mean, down the shore when there's no trees and it's just the middle of it's on Landis Avenue, Ocean Drive. I just wonder how residents would feel. And I guess my other question is, certainly I don't dispute the selection of the location. You know, it certainly is an area that floods, and yes, people do drive through there, and you know, the library's there, and the firehouse, and the school administration building. But we do have a stormwater project planned for there, correct? So, which would hopefully alleviate that. So if we install this and then we do a stormwater project there, would we leave them there, or can they be moved?
Commissioner, I was anticipating this question. So please remember that all our stormwater management projects reduce the probability of flooding, but they don't eliminate the flooding. So in a certain event, that will flood. That area will flood. In lesser events, we're hoping to address that with this two-pronged project we have, but it won't. This sign won't be left high and dry, no pun intended.
I think I heard you in your introduction to say that the wording of the sign is...
That's up to the board. It could say high water, road flooded, flood, whatever you want. So that's just a stamped painted metal sign.
Do we have room for turnaround, don't drown?
Well, it just seems like, I mean, if it's a static sign that says road flooded and you don't know that it lights up when it's an alert and you're new to the area, is it going to cause like weird U-turns like my no through street sign does on my, it's like when somebody encounters a sign that, I worry that it says something definitive that isn't true. When the road's not flooded, the road is not flooded. So it might just be the wording is getting stuck in my craw, and we could fix that easily, but,
I understand your concern. And I'm not convinced either on this, but I think that there's a long enough runway on South Wayne to alleviate. It's not like you have two curves, corners that you're coming around there that are blind. I think there's a long enough leeway.
Have we asked the residents if, they're comfortable with this? I mean, they're pretty big signs.
So
They're
the
big.
reason, one of the reasons this was chosen was because of the area. It's not a residential area, firehouse. I mean, as you go Runnymede, obviously, but the direct area of South Wayne is the school administration building, the middle school. I mean, we can do whatever the board wants. If you want us to pull the area or get some existing customers of this to see how they work, if they feel, there's a cost benefit, whatever that pleases the board, we can do.
I don't know if it helps Commissioner Borowski, but the residents of South Wayne obviously are on, at least on the Ward 3 side, are on a campaign around this today. Actually, both sides are on Ward 3 there once you get up. But I received 3 calls in support of it this afternoon while I was working. So I think that they have a little bit of a campaign going there, or at least some of them do.
Mr. Norsini, to your offer, I would love to hear from, another township or a place that has used these signs. I'd love to hear the success of it.
Would Commissioner Borowski's count? No, we can do that.
People drove through them, and they get stuck in the intersection. The intersection at the end of my street floods. There's signs on either way, facing either direction. It's a straight street, and people still go through. They come across and get stuck, and they come through it, and they get stuck, and the signs are blinking. So,
Well, look, I mean, the picture right there, there's,
Yeah, so the picture here is terrible advertising.
I was wondering about their
Not the
marketing
best
also.
ad for this product.
I don't know who does TAPCO's marketing and advertising. Might want to switch firms on that, yeah.
where,
Is there a product where when it gets the sensor that an arm goes down?
So that,
Where you can actually have a barrier?
that was something we found, we're not able to do that on a state road, and there's a whole host of reasons for that. And I don't know that you would want to do that on a township road as well. I think there's some liability issues there. But no, this is about, for this is one company that makes it. They're probably the most popular. But we're not able to do something mechanical that blocks the street.
And you would get into added expense with the fire company in order to put sensors on there to activate that arm for it to go up in emergency situations. And then you face the possibility that the sensors aren't working. You will get drivers that will drive through that in a truck to get to a fire or an emergency situation. They'll
So-
take it out.
To Maura's point, instead of it saying road flooded, could you have something where there's just like an LCD screen or something? Because I get it, like you see road flooded and you're like, well, it's not flooded. It doesn't, it's only, road flooded when lights blink. So could you do like an LCD screen and then keep it blank until there's a problem? Or
I don't believe TAPCO, I mean, I'm not aware of any product like that. I don't believe TAPCO offers that. What you're paying for is the technology to have a sensor that when it's touched by the water, talks to all these signs and puts them on. So,
Sure.
but I'm unaware of a flat screen, an LCD, LED screen for this purpose.
So
yeah.
what
Just because we're paying for the technology, right? And I agree with the technology, but the message is not great. And I think that there's an easy workaround, and I'm not saying that there's a product out there, but maybe there is. And to say that it's flooded, I mean, I don't, it also doesn't bode well with Radnor, where people are like, oh yeah, it's flooded, great, it floods here. So, I don't know, I think that there's gotta be a workaround. We're paying for the technology is the sensor, and the message is off. Let's fix the message, and then I think everybody could be agreeable.
So that, what I have in my, the signals that tell you that there's going to be a red light around a turn, the word red shows up when the light is red. So it's that sort of thing. Like those sorts of those alerts are great. But I sort of agree. It's like if I didn't notice that there were little lights that could be lit that aren't currently lit, I would always see that as a warning sign to not go down that way.
So why don't I offer this to the board if there's some questions? Let me contact the manufacturer, see if he has something like Commissioner Mulroney stated. And I know exactly what you mean with the red signal ahead. I'll also contact, have him provide me a list of other folks that have purchased that. We'll reach out to them to see if they feel there was a benefit and, how they like them and if it's helped them out. If that will help you make a decision, we'll gladly do that and have it back for you on the next meeting.
Well, Steve, what's the sensor, where's the sensor mounted that gets touched by the water? And
so we choose that, Commissioner. We actually have a schematic of that. So aside from the 3 signs, there's going to be a pedestal with that sensor. That talks, obviously, so that, so to speak, talks electronically. There's going to be a repeater so all 3 can be communicated with. So
what's the pedestal and where's the pedestal?
So,
and how when does the water touch it? I guess it has to be in a flood area, so there's got to be some way for the water to get in, so it's beside the street, I guess.
Correct. So that's where we'll go out and we'll show them where to place it. And it's going to be at a low spot, obviously.
Is it on this picture anywhere?
No, these are just conceptual pictures. I mean, these are just pictures of other places, not our, because we told them that is something we would want to go out there with. I would bring staff traffic out and we would pick the appropriate spot so that as the water rose, the signs would go on and we'd know it, that would be the best time.
Is that thing on the left, the pedestal right there? Right there?
No, I don't believe so. That looks like an old pier. I think that floods quite a bit down there.
Also, where exactly would the sign be? Like directly in front of the firehouse? How far apart are the signs?
No, so again, PennDOT's going to dictate some of this. So, where we put the barricades right by, as you come down, there's right by the post office, which is West Wayne, right? That's one. So in that area is one. Also one, so that as you're approaching northbound South Wayne and or Runnymede, and or Windermere, you would see that one. And then there would be one on Runnymede because on some storms, actually the place that floods the worst is down by the War Memorial, right? So there would be one to warn the folks who are coming from Runnymede down that there is a flooding condition.
Is this the worst area of deepest flooding or is just the most traveled and commonly flooded?
I think it's one of the most commonly flooded, just like Banbury floods quite a bit. This has a different twist, though. Aside from being heavily traveled, you have an emergency services center in Radnor Fire Company being right there. So,
but this won't help them.
It's where we do most of our rescues, believe it or not, right in front of the administration building.
Okay. And where? Okay. And so this is this like a trial, or is this like the place that needs it the most, or?
As Mr. White said, I think it was looked at. We actually got a price, staff traffic and I, for many places.
Right.
This is the one that seemed the best be for a test. So aside from the 2 items I mentioned, Commissioner, I'll get you or all you commissioners, a schematic of where we're proposing to put all these things, some more pictures. So if that would help you make a decision, I can compile all this for the next meeting or whatever meeting you wish it to be.
Yeah,
at.
I was just interested in how it works, because you're going to have some kind of pylon that's got water that's allowed to somehow get into it.
Yes.
It's got to be tamper-proof, and it can't go off in the rain.
Plow-proof and everything.
Yeah. And also, because Jake came up with this, and also the arms, on Stenton Avenue at Flowertown Road and White Marsh, they have the arm that comes down and blocks the street, and that's State Road.
We can ask again. We were told that wasn't something we were allowed to do, but I don't have a problem reaching out to PennDOT. They're pretty able to be contacted.
If you know anybody at White Marsh Township, it's Flowertown Road and Stenton Avenue, and there's definitely the arm that goes, and it does flood there quite a bit. The arms, I think, are something. I think it's a legitimate issue if that side that says road flooded all the time, and it could get ignored.
Can I just ask one other question? What's our liability on this? Is there, just like with the arms, wasn't there a concern, like if the arms went down, what if somebody goes through and ends up stuck in the middle and they're like, oh, the light wasn't flashing, and then we can't prove that it wasn't? Like, what's our liability? Do we know that?
None, because we have a new truck that will go and rescue them.
I'm just wondering, like,
I mean, I don't think that there's a big liability for a warning device that is out there. Whether or not things break down, just like lights break down when a traffic light breaks down. We would have to go to our insurance company to actually check and verify if there is any liability. However, I don't think there's a large amount of liability if it does not flash.
So my goal in all this since August of 2018 was just to find low-cost measures to increase safety and, in addition, protect our first responders so they're not having to go into high waters unnecessarily. Rich, you mentioned the truck. I think the truck is a great investment. I appreciate the township making that investment, and my understanding is the last storm, it had a lot of use. I sat out there, Commissioner Enderle, in August of 2019 outside the fire station. I watched 3 cars drive through and get stuck right outside the firehouse. So you can go down there in any big storm, and people are going to try to make it through there, and they're not successful. So I think this is a great position for a pilot program to see if it works and how effective it is. And at the end of the day, for preventing 1 or 2 cars from getting stuck in there, that's a handful of first responders that are not having to go in to save somebody.
So I'm hearing that we're going to table this. I will move to table. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion to table passes. Moving on to item 4K, King of Prussia Early Warning Overheight Vehicle Detection System.
So I'll tee this one up. This is another one similar to our the discussion we just had about the flooded roads. I'm sure all the commissioners are aware of the King of Prussia low bridge and the number of strikes that have occurred there over the past couple of years. In fact, those statistics were included in the presentation that I emailed this morning. Hopefully, everyone had a chance to leaf through it quickly. If we've got specific questions, again, we've got the experts here, the guys who've not only responded to those incidents, but have studied the situation, studied alternatives, and spoken to the various, digital mapping companies, PennDOT, Amtrak, SEPTA, and everyone regarding the situation. What it boils down to is that if we want to put up any kind of detection system, it's on the township. The one thing we've learned through the years in all of these discussions is that while we may be able to grab a grant if one is available, PennDOT has otherwise said, Radnor, you're on your own. Amtrak has echoed the same thing. And the other thing we know is that when a bridge strike occurs, it is our fire companies and our police department that is responding to address the situation, clean up the mess, and it's our residents who are usually stuck on either side of it, waiting patiently for it to open back up or rerouted. So again, my understanding is that we've had these conversations in the past. For whatever reason, it wasn't something that the township moved forward with. Again, as I understand it, I think there were some liability questions about, if the township put it up, would we become liable for bridge strikes? Similar to the flooding one, anecdotal conversations with our insurer is that, just adding another layer of detection and warning doesn't necessarily increase the township's liability. There's already signage up there. If you've driven in and around there, you've seen it. The problem is our trucks that are too tall, for whatever reason, don't see it and plow into the bridge. So what we're bringing back here for the board's consideration tonight and what we're looking for is there's still work to be done. In the presentation, we identified 2 potential solutions, one of which PennDOT has said they don't have an issue with. The other one, PennDOT said specifically in our district they will not allow, and that's the one where you've got the canisters dangling from an arm. So you would physically hit something before you got to the bridge that would warn you. As we understand it, PennDOT in our district doesn't allow that type of device. That may be the best one because it's low technology, and it's, even if you're not paying attention, it's going to alert you. The next option, and this is included in the presentation as well, is something not too dissimilar from what we just talked about with the flooding. It's an I-beam that shoots across the road, and if an object breaks that beam because of its height, flashing lights start going off.
I'm sorry, Bill, just to clarify, I-beam EYE or I-beam like a big steel girder?
EYE, like an electronic laser beam that is at the bottom of your garage door probably, that alerts the garage door to stop shutting if something if something breaks that beam or someone walks into your garage while the door's coming down, it tells the opener to stop. So it would be something similar to that, and the lights would start flashing. The police department, working with the engineering department, have spec'd out locations. We have some probable cost, although again, there's still some work to be done. So what we're looking for tonight from the board is, given the number of strikes that we've realized, I think the number is 119 or so in the last 11 years at that site. Given the amount of cost and expense associated with having to respond to it and the disruption to traffic, are we interested in upping our vehicle detection warning over in that area and trying something a little bit more, visually grabbing that might do a better job of alerting people than, again, what we talked about, like a static sign, which obviously hasn't solved the problem.
Before we open this up to discussion, what are you looking for from us? Because I don't have a motion.
So what we're looking for from the board tonight is a consensus or direction on if you feel like the project is viable enough for us to finish doing the more detailed work with specific locations, the exact type of system, working with PennDOT, getting the answer definitively on the liability. There's a lot of staff time associated with pulling all that together. And given the history of the project, we just want to make sure that we're investing that time wisely if there's real consideration from the board's perspective to pursue it. I don't know, police department, if I left anything out material. Again, these guys have lived it for the last 2+ years, lived this conversation for the last 2+ years. They've been dealing with bridge strikes even longer.
Can I say a quick
I think it's just about finding direction. The presentation hasn't changed with the exception of the numbers, as Mr. White stated. So we do have this as an option. It goes along with the discussion Mr. Norsini gave. Is another tool in the toolbox, but it's not an absolute. We can't guarantee that there won't be bridge strikes. So you guys know the situation. We do have one image we could show you on the PowerPoint, so we just need direction on which way to go. A cost estimate would be for the 3 locations spec'd out by our team would roughly be $100,000 a piece, but we don't want to give a quote per se until we respec it, make sure it follows PennDOT's requirements and go that way, but that would be a ballpark figure that we had gotten from before.
Who owns the bridge? Whose bridge is that? PennDOT's or Amtrak?
It's an Amtrak bridge. If I heard the question correctly, I apologize. I heard two people.
It's Amtrak's bridge.
And PennDOT's road.
It's PennDOT's road. So, I mean, my big fear is getting back to the overpass in Garrett Hill where you change a light bulb and now you own it. And I'll ask the solicitor this. I mean, this is a safety issue. And so before I ask you, the question is, Superintendent Flanagan, do you think the best option would be, I'll call it the chandelier, although it's not allowed on that road? Do you believe that would be the best option if allowable?
We believe that what we saw, we're in District 6 for the commissioners, so it's a particular zone. But as a team approach, the police department, Mr. Norsini, Township administration would like to have what we'll call a tactile. We're actually hitting something to get their attention. We have added a lot of signage. Actually, Commissioner Booker was out there when the state came down. They did put up a lot of extra signage. We actually believe there's been a minor effect to that, a minor positive effect. The numbers have changed a little bit, but we still have those strikes. There's a lot of signage if you actually go slow and pay attention. So something that would actually kind of bang your cab or touch the vehicle would be the ultimate, the best thing that we have seen so far.
So with that being said, I'm hearing that we're not allowed to do it, but is that something that we should pay the solicitor to go ahead? And if we would have to sue PennDOT to allow that, because it is a matter of personal safety, and you see some of those pictures, that's something that I would, before sending our solicitor to fight for that, because that is a real issue where someone could get killed under there. If you're walking or you're in a small car, and that's why we have it. And unless you do bold things and go out and try to change a system that obviously isn't working, and I don't necessarily know that you can flash these lights, as we talk about with the floodwater, and maybe people will get it or maybe they won't, but according to our police, the best option on the table is not allowable. So I think that we as a board should look to see if we can get it to be made allowed, although that's poor grammar. We should look into doing whatever we need to make sure that we're going to save lives and protect the community. Mr. Solicitor, is that something that could be done, or what's the success rate?
I mean, we can go and pursue PennDOT. PennDOT has a very strange way of looking at things, believing that what they believe and what they're going to do is right with their roads. So I don't know how successful we are going to be. We can certainly look into it to provide you a better idea of what the cost would be and what our success rate would be. I don't think that I can tell you that right at this moment, but I can look into it for you. But I do have to say that it would be a long road going up against PennDOT for something that they believe that they believe is not warranted in the area.
And just one more point, it always seems that PennDOT tells us what to do when it comes to a pothole that they don't want to fix or they're going to take their time with, or a whole host of activities. And I'm sure that Manager White, you probably have a long list in your head that I think that it's time that we as a board and we as a community say, hey, look, this isn't working, this is what will work, and we need some kind of exemption to possibly save lives. So I don't know if I'm going to get support from the board. My guess is that I'm not, but I think that, to Commissioner Booker's point, we need to do something bold, or this is going to keep happening. And to do something that may or may not work, or to try to put a Band-Aid on it, it's not a long-term solution. So I would listen to what Superintendent Flanagan says, what he believes the best course of action is, and try to pursue that, even if it is more of a long shot. Thank you.
Commissioner, if I may jump in on that. So my recommendation to the board would be perhaps before we bring the solicitor in and no offense, create an adversarial condition, let's open up the lines of contact with PennDOT, sit down with them once again, hear again. It was some time ago that we were told that. We can find out from them if that's the case, hear why they don't allow it. And I've also been in touch with 2 traffic engineering firms that design these, have designed them at the airport and various spots throughout the 5-county region. If you truly want to know what it's going to cost, my recommended course of action is we sit with PennDOT, find out from them, yay or nay on the one the chief has put forth. If they say yes, I can get a cost proposal from an engineering standpoint, because what you saw for the high water signs is, for lack of a better term, small potatoes for what will have to be done for one of these systems if it's an electronic system with the warning and then the sign. Or if we were allowed to go the other route, we still need permitting. There's still design costs for the foundation and so forth. So that's one course of action I would recommend. I can set that up. PennDOT is not a meeting person face-to-face, but I Zoom and many other meetings with them all the time. So we could set that up maybe and start that dialogue once again.
Mr. President, if I could, just let's back up and maybe I should have done a better job setting the table for this. I'd like to simplify the direction from the board's perspective instead of trying to figure out exactly what we're looking for in terms of the end product. Does the board, I mean, from our perspective, we're recommending that we do move forward with coming back with some sort of solution to try to prevent these bridge strikes. We've got 2 alternatives that have been investigated extensively already. What we're looking for is, does the board agree that this is a worthwhile venture from our perspective to invest the time to build out the project and then come back to the board with an ultimate recommendation on?
For whatever it's worth, my thought is that it's definitely worthwhile trying to find a solution to this problem. I have zero hope that a sign will be the solution to that problem. If there's a physical barrier, I agree with Sean that we can put up, not to like stop the trucks, but just so that they can be aware you've just driven into something. This is over height. Your truck is over height and you're going to run into a bridge. I would be interested in that. I hope that it would cost a good deal less, but regardless, I think it would be far more successful. I don't envision a truck driver who plows his truck into a bridge is going to be the person who is paying really close attention to the signs on the side of the road.
And to echo that, I would be all for investigating. I don't know that 3 at $100,000 or 2 at $100,000, is going to be worth the investment. I'll just throw this out there because I'm curious, only because I've experienced it. I've been out there, but I'm just curious, Chief Flanagan, some of the other officers in the room, if you had to guesstimate, and I know I'm asking you to speculate, if you had to guess, how many of the truck drivers that strike that, or trucks in general that strike that bridge, how many of them do you take into custody for being under the influence? 20%, 30%?
Officer Janoski with the Highway Patrol Unit. I know firsthand myself, in the last 2 years, I've arrested two over-the-road haulers for DUIs, just in 2 of the cases that I handled. I can't give you a percentage on all of them.
I know. I'm asking you to speculate, but 2 that you've handled.
I've handled 2.
Yeah.
In the last year.
I've been out there as part of the fire company, pushing a broom and cleaning up, and I'm always amazed at how many of those truck drivers are taken into custody for suspected being under the influence. And to Commissioner Larkin's point, I don't know that you're going to change a lot of that behavior.
to clarify, you said you've handled 2, and in each instance, you made a DUI arrest?
I've handled numerous truck crashes there, but in 2 of the instances over the last year, 2 of them have been DUIs.
Got it. So, okay.
All right, and
We're speculating. I'm just pointing out that, you know, there's a lot of the behavior there. When they're hitting that bridge, you know, at 30 miles an hour, you know, full intent going through. There's no slowing down about it. And I don't know that an early warning system's going to change that behavior much for some, whether they're under the influence or not.
Well, unless they hit something else first.
Correct.
all right, now, so this thing is near my house, and I've lived there for 20 years. And, you know, I've brought this to the board several times. We had PennDOT and Amtrak and SEPTA sitting right in front of us, and we grilled those guys. We have met with, at the bridge, with SEPTA, Amtrak, PennDOT, PA Truckers Association, the congressman's office, and we've walked it, and everyone said, yep, it's a problem. And Amtrak said, we're not going to raise the tracks, and PennDOT said, we're not going to lower the road. The issue that came up before this was that we didn't want to spend the money because they're afraid of liability, like have to keep the signal. PennDOT is not going to do it. And Bill, I wish you would have put that presentation with this so the people in the public could see. We have solid numbers, 119 strikes in the past decade or so. 119, it's 1 every 6 weeks. Tennis balls dangling and hitting the cab is not going to stop. That's going to, one, it's going to cause noise to the neighbors, but that is not going to be the way to fix this, because the guys hit branches and other things. What we've done is we've put a huge amount of signs. So if you look at the presentation that Bill gave, and you look at the page 9, you can see there are dozens. Now, there's a dozen signs that have been put up. These are all 8-foot-high signs. And on page 9, you can see some of them you can't see. There's in older pictures. There's huge numbers of signs, and we still get hit. And I go to almost, when these strikes are quite often, I go to them, and by far most of the truck drivers are not intoxicated. Most of them are not taken away. Some of them may be, but most of them are not. At 119 strikes, we say 2. It's anecdotal, but that's less than 2%. The people are following their GPS. They're not looking at at the bridge, and they smash into it. And these are professional drivers. Mascaro, we have trash and concrete that have hit it. These guys are not drunk. The bridge is an 1875 bridge. The bridge was fine in 1875, but it is insufficient for 17,000 trips per day, which is what we're ramping up to with the Penn Medicine building and associated. So if you go to page 9, so there's the 119 hit the bridge. That's 1 every 6 weeks for over a decade. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. One more. Right there. See the 1010 sign? Look, and you see down in front of the bridge, there's 3 1010 signs right by the bridge now that PennDOT has put up $10,000 worth of signs. I guarantee you. And
2 more prior to that.
there's 2 more prior to that, and then there's also some down by Croton Road. So there's a huge amount of signs. There's signs every direction, everywhere. PennDOT is like, okay, we'll put the signs up, and they have been put up. This issue is not about whose liability or what's the thing's getting hit. And the fact of it is, I would argue today we have the system that you're talking about, Chris, because You get a tactile, you get a response when you hit that I-beam in front of the bridge. We have the system. It's called an I-beam in front of the side of the bridge, and it gets struck quite often. So you're like, well, let's make it redundant. Let's add another I-beam or tennis balls or chains that they hit. But the fact of it is, right now, they hit something. They go past the signs, they hit something. This overheight vehicle detection system would give them flashers and a diversion so that they would turn off. In this case, at that light, you'd turn off at Matson Ford Road, and on the other side, it would be Radnor Chester. Look, this is an issue that the township cleans up every time anyway. We're the ones that look silly because we have professional drivers that hit this thing every 6 weeks, and we have all the officers, Chris, Janowski, we have all the people out, and we have fire, we have cleanup, we have public works, and it's every 6 weeks. We don't do anything. If somebody's drunk, all right, they'll get arrested. I've asked, John's not here right now, but I talked to John. John was going to work on, we wanted to have fines at least if they hit. We should have a heavy fine. We haven't gotten any ordinance that would place a fine for hitting the bridge and the cost. Every 6 weeks we have the township clean this up. So this is one more way. It's another warning that would divert some of these guys. And if you don't want to do it, don't do it. But this is what we see. We've had trash trucks. That's a trailer that was dragging a backhoe. And that low clearance sign, right, if you go to it right now, it's not all yellow and nice. That's all ripped off and all scraped up because that is our tactile response. When they hit that, they don't hit the bridge, they hit that I-beam and they flip over the truck. That's typical. And this is every 6 weeks, not to mention all the times that people turn around. So I brought this to this board before, it was voted down. I said to Bill, I brought it before, I think it should come before it again, but it's up to you, Bill. This is your people that have to clean this up. This is repeated. And we're spending the money for it. PennDOT's not going to fix it. PennDOT's not going to clean it up. Amtrak's not going to clean it up. It comes down to these people right here in front of us that are going to clean it up, to direct the traffic, block the roads. And how much is that 119 times?
I don't think anybody's arguing that we need to do something. The question is what?
What
is the right mix here?
This is it.
What is going to do it?
This is what we brought.
We don't know that this is it.
No, we do know. We do know. This has been.
This hasn't been tested.
Commissioner Enderle, I've been looking at this for years, and Chris and I have talked about, and people before you have sat here. We've sat here with all the bureaucrats. We've sat here with the police. Now, it's up to you. You can say, I disagree, I don't want to do it. Then fine, Damien, say, no, I don't want to do it. I want to let trucks continue to smash in and clean it up.
That's
fine,
not at all
it's
what
up to you.
anybody's saying. The question is what is the right tool? Because we've been presented with a couple different options.
I'm not fighting with anybody. I think the comments that are coming from the board are like, this is some kind of figment of the imagination. It's not. It's like, oh, it's a few drunk truck. It's not.
I was asking one little question. I was asking an anecdote.
Most of these truck drivers are
everybody.
Professional drivers. Most of them, by far, are not drunk. This bridge is an 18.
Bridge has the floor.
This is just common. So we could do something, or we could just say, no, we're going to continue to clean it up. It's up to this board to set the policy. I think we should put in an electronic overheight vehicle detection system, and your point you made about the signs, Maura and Lisa is right. It's going to say divert. It's going to flash when they break that I-beam. I don't know why it costs $300,000 when you put in a garage door electric guy for a few $100, but whatever. It costs what it costs. The point is to have crap, I had
Commissioner
damn it,
Mulroney.
I had the thing. I don't think that's a modern solution, but it's 119 times. We have numbers, 119 strikes in the past 12 years. It's every 6 weeks. These guys are cleaning it up. It's our problem, and it's not right that it's our problem. And we've made that point to the other bureaucrats in the state and the other governmental entities. It's not right that it's our problem, but it is. These guys have to clean it up. These guys have to call the people and pull it out.
These guys right here clean it up.
All right. It's a, okay. It's fire. It's public works.
Can we,
And so
we just
if you can do
can we-
something, or we don't need to do anything. This board has to set the policy.
Okay, Commissioner Mulroney, you were next, and then Commissioner Borowski.
So I guess, Rich, I can appreciate that you've seen this a lot and you live near some of them and it affects you.
Yeah, it's
Like, I don't know who you're trying to, it feels like you're arguing with somebody, and I don't think you have to. I think we all agree that this is a awful issue. I would love to have any recommendation that would allow us to fix this, to, solve this problem. I think Mr. Norsini put out that he needs to do some contact with PennDOT again and rebuild it back up again. I would love to have those conversations happening, and I would love to find out what the solution is.
Commissioner Mulroney, I would just suggest, we've met with PennDOT. We've had them sitting right here before this board. I think, Lisa, you might have been on the board. This was the one just before you. We brought these guys in and sat them and grilled them in front of the public. So we've talked to PennDOT, and PennDOT has put up a dozen signs. I just showed them to you. PennDOT, so PennDOT has done what they're going to do. Amtrak, we've talked to everybody. We've been looking at this for years. We have the data right there. Again, I think this is a failure of the township. We need to fix it, but it's up to this board. You guys need to decide. My recommendation, and I've studied this. I know Chris wants to have chains or something over. I want to have an electronic eye and a sign diverting it. I think that's the better way. That's the way to do this. We've talked about it for years, and I brought it to this board again. I think you should vote for it.
Okay, well, we're not voting today. We're having a discussion. Commissioner Borowski, do you want to add something?
Well, we're providing direction.
So, yeah, I mean, I think they're just looking for direction. The presentation that Bill had shared with us, it looks like there's still more investigation to be done by the police. I would certainly, agree, give you leave to go ahead and continue to investigate it. Commissioner Booker, I don't disagree with you. And yes, we did have all of those representatives in. I was on the board at the time. I'm guessing Commissioner Farhi and Commissioner Abel were as well. So,
right.
We have talked to them, and so I mean, I'm fine giving our police, and the township, whatever direction you guys need, or whatever approval, or the blessing, or whatever, to go and continue to investigate and find the best option. But the other thing is, we don't have endless dollars to invest. I mean, I know that it's a problem, and I know it's a thing, but we don't have endless dollars. And so I think we just need to figure out what's going to be the best and most cost-effective answer, because we all been saying that we are going to be facing, some budget shortfalls. And what I don't want is for these gentlemen to do all this work and it be another thing that we add to the capital project list and we don't fund, or we can't fund. So let's figure that out, and let's come up with the most, I think, cost-effective option.
Well, the one thing is, we're incurring costs today, and right here on this drawing, this is the concept: electronic eye. It diverts so the trucks don't hit it, and it is a sign with a lighted sign. So
We do understand.
And we've investigated this. I would ask. I think this board needs to direct the staff to get a design and a cost on a number on something like this. If you want to get a design and a cost on a chains hanging over or tennis balls, or what do you want? I mean, that's going to be a big superstructure you're going to have hanging over the road, but I think an eye on a pole is better. But if you want to get that,
Get it. I
then,
promise you have been
but
heard.
let's send them to do something, not to investigate.
Is there any additional commissioner comment from a commissioner who has not yet spoken? at length?
Commissioner Larkin, so Commissioner Booker, I supported this in the past. I still think it's a good idea. And I know we disagree on this issue that I'm going to mention, but until we have some sort of solution, I'm of the opinion that we should not be allowing pedestrians to walk through that tunnel where we're acknowledging it is some risk.
That makes sense to me. I hear you.
So,
Is there any
so again,
additional
Commissioner Larkham,
comment?
I would ask that we direct the staff to pursue, not investigate, but to get solutions and dollar figures, not to investigate. We've investigated.
Well, I don't like the idea of the electronic eye. It sounds like others do not as well. I know that you very much do. Staff certainly should feel free to investigate that if they want to do so. I don't police all of your time, but that's not something that I'm interested in. So I'm not.
Why not? Why are you not interested in it?
For the reasons that I said before.
Which is what?
I don't think you were paying attention, so I'm not going to repeat them.
Yeah, because
there
it doesn't
any
make any sense.
additional
I wasn't paying
commissioner
attention to a senseless statement. It makes sense.
We're now moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Delaware County real estate property reassessment discussion.
You didn't.
We did.
What's the direction? What's the instruction then? Make it clear so the
Instruction is
public
that The board
understands.
is interested in moving on this project. Individual board members have said that they are not interested in the specific electronic eye that you have discussed. Staff are free to investigate any avenues that they would like to do so that they think are profitable. None of us have voted. If they come back and convince everybody here, or a majority of us, that an eye is a good solution in spite of what we've said thus far, we'll vote on it. If they decide to come back and say we've interfaced with PennDOT, and PennDOT says that we can now put up the floating cans, we'll vote on it. Moving on. Delaware County real estate property reassessment discussion. We touched on this briefly in new business last week. The question that I think that we have is twofold. The first is the board interested in doing something in order to either pause or ask for a reevaluation of the real property reassessment that has been done by Delaware County? And second, what would the mechanism be? I'm going to take those, I think, in the opposite order. Mr. Grimm?
Yes.
I know that you are kind of filling in for John Rice today, but are you in a position to make a suggestion as to what our mechanism would be, or is this something that we should maybe push to?
Well, I don't know if I can make a recommendation which. What I did is I did talk to the school district's attorney to figure out where they are and what has occurred so far. And obviously, there wasn't a reassessment that was done. I think we all know that. And with that reassessment, the school district doesn't believe that that reassessment was successful. They believe that either they need to get injunctive relief, which would stay, or the other option is to seek another reassessment. They have not determined yet how they want to approach this. And I think the reason why they're a little tentative is because if they do the injunctive relief or they stay, they believe that's going to be like stopping a train and not allowing most people to look at their budget and know what they're going to have in the next year. Right now, they are looking at a considerable amount of appeals that is going through. I think in Delaware County, they have filed about 580. I believe 285 are in Radnor. Now, this is both commercial and residential that are there.
Who's filed? The school district has filed?
School
or
district has filed.
School district has.
So, obviously, they do not believe that the reassessment was correct. And a lot of that has to do with the commercial sector. Obviously, there, as I think everyone knows, there was a 4 to 5% increase in the residential paying for, or an increase in them paying for ultimately the taxes that are there, and they don't believe that is correct either. And what I got out of it was that they did not know what direction they would want to go. However, they would update us, and they would certainly appreciate our support when they do determine. Now, I am not ready to answer you of what I think that you should do in the two of those. My understanding was more that we were going to let the school district kind of broach that and determine, and we were going to see whether or not we wanted to support them in that endeavor.
Okay. Gentlemen and ladies, what are your thoughts?
School district is typically taking the lead in these, for these, and the school district they filed 500.
That's my understanding in, but that's in all of Delaware County.
All of Delaware County.
That's not.
But you said 200 were in Radnor, that would be our school district.
Yeah, I believe there was and I think I said 200. I think it is 245 in Radnor.
So those are challenges by the school district specifically, or is that just anyone who has said, I want my property to be looked at?
That
for
is
reassessment?
challenges by the school district, both commercial and residential properties. And that was for, obviously an increase in taxes. They did not believe that the assessment was correct.
Well, it was an increase in the assessed value, right? It's because this is revenue neutral for tax. It's just going to be the same dollars sloshed around slightly differently.
Yes.
I thought it was a decrease, especially in a lot of the commercial properties. So a lot of the commercial properties were reassessed lower.
It was, and that's
Okay.
why they're appealing it.
Okay.
So I had a conversation with him, and he gave me a lot of information. But I believe in Delaware County, there was some number of a $720 million decrease from commercial properties in taxes. So, obviously they don't think that should have occurred. If you know things about assessments and everything else that go along, commercial properties are obviously more up-to-date than residential properties because they get overturned more. They are brought up in front of townships because they're going to either put a new tenant in, or they're going to do improvements, they're going to do everything else. So they're looked at more recently than, let's say, your residential properties.
Bill, we said last time we wanted to see the numbers that the school district was looking at. In other words, we just had to, in the county, $720 million of the new assessed value has now been attached. And actually, Attorney Grimm said tax dollars, not taxes, it's $720 million in assessed value seems to have shifted from commercial to residential.
I don't know if it has shifted all the way to residential. What I'm saying is I believe that was 720 million lower from commercial, but that would definitely say why it went for a 4 to 5% hike in residential properties.
Right. So in other words, these numbers, it's in the abstract, we need to understand what the baseline was, how they're comparing it, and where does that number come from. So do you have that? And remember, last time I asked, could we see that? And I didn't see it in the packet. So do we have that?
I'm sorry, I did not get that. Did you?
Yeah, so, and I apologize that we didn't have this ready in time for the packet. I've got the spreadsheet live. If, Ian, you want to switch it over to my spreadsheet, I can take 30 seconds to show this because it's validating the conversation. So let me see if we can blow this up so that we can see it. So I've highlighted in green residential and commercial, and this is, and then I move my cell and we're out of here. So the top row is commercial. We've got 4 columns. We have the Radnor tax pre-assessment with today's millage rate, 4.402. And then Radnor tax revenue neutral, which takes into consideration the reassessed assessments, the reassessed values. Algebraically, we get to a new revenue neutral millage rate, which works out because you can see the grand total in revenue, 16.4 million is the same between the two. So it's just redistributing the revenue. And you could see on the commercial side, just in our Radnor tax, which by comparison is going to be pretty small compared to some of the other entities, especially the schools, $550,000 reduction in the commercial portion of the real estate tax, while the residential component grows by $867,000. So that, I mean, in numbers, in Radnor numbers, that validates the concern about the shift in who's paying the tax obligation.
The other 3 categories, exempt, then round, and PERDA. What are the other?
Well, obviously exempt doesn't factor in because while they have assessed values, they don't pay taxes. So I just applied the formula to all the properties. So in a real world, this row here would be zeros. Ground is just as it would describe. It's just a piece of ground with no building on it. But as you could see, the amount of revenue in the delta is not significant. I mean, it is in terms of percentage for the public utility ground, but in terms of dollars, it's negligible. So it really, I mean, it boils down to the shift from commercial to residential. And after looking at these numbers, I can see why the school district has raised the alarm that I would agree that there is a pretty substantial shift.
So it sounds like the school district basically is taking this seriously and is making movements. It's going to be my suggestion that we don't reinvent the wheel and we just do what we usually do, which is follow along with the school district. They have a much larger financial stake in this project than we do. We can keep an eye on what it is that they do, and I mean, I'm sure that there's some things that I wouldn't want to get involved with, but for the most part, we can just join with whatever motion they file or whatever steps they take and support them.
I would support, joining with the school district to support their efforts. I think that, what they're definitely doing is fighting for the residents on the residential side. So, I don't, because it does have to be revenue neutral. I don't know that they're fighting for the revenue, but it's really looking at, fighting for those residents that are being really negatively impacted.
Well, no, the school district is fighting to increase the assessments of the commercial, right, and certain residential. So they're not fighting, they don't care about, what they care about is the decrease in funding associated with the commercial properties, and they're appealing those and certain residential ones. There's nothing they can do about the shift. It is what it is, but they're not fighting for the residents, they're fighting to keep their revenue and to increase it. And
if they increase the business revenue, then it has to be revenue neutral, so, right?
Yeah, they can't increase their revenue.
They're not seeking, they can't increase the revenue. They're looking to shift the burden. The burden has been shifted onto the residents.
No, because if they win, there's not going to be a concurrent reduction in everybody's residential assessments. They're all fixed. That's been resolved.
No, but
So-
the tax rate would change in
The
such a way that it would affect the residents favorably.
I think it's all set. So I think that this would only, any appeals at this point would result in additional revenue. It's not going to, it's not going to
additional
inure.
revenue. It has to be revenue neutral.
We said it. It's set right now. It's revenue neutral.
No, we haven't said it. We haven't voted on a budget yet. We haven't set a millage rate. It's not set.
Okay, the millage rate will still be, well, that's why I want to look at these numbers and understand that. I don't know that that's, you might be right if it's already set, but if you increase, if the school district has filed 200 appeals, whatever increase they get will occur after the millage rate is set.
It may, and that's
Yeah,
one
yeah.
of the reasons to, like, theoretically, those appeals could be decided tomorrow. I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be a good reason for the court to stay everything until we're done.
Well, is the court considering staying everything until, or
Nobody's
we're
made
just,
that
we're
motion.
moving forward?
I don't think that they've asked yet. I don't think that that has been concluded, and they haven't filed anything to determine which way was the best way. I think that the attorney at least hinted at the fact that he thought, and this is by no means what they're going to do or not, that another reassessment may be the better plan, that they would reassess everything again. But that's that was just what he was stating to us.
I will say, with the way that COVID-19 has affected the residential and commercial markets in opposite ways, another reassessment might just exacerbate the change, but
Yeah, so how would that work? They want to get a court order to require the county to redo the entire assessment based on 200 individual appeals?
I don't think it was based on 200, but I mean, that's just another way to do it. There's only, there's the injunctive relief or file a challenge to seek another reassessment. Those are their two options.
Who's working on that challenge to file it? Is that Radnor, or is that a collective county-wide movement, or is it just one case?
I don't know if I understood your
So who's going to get the reassessment? Who's going to file the lawsuit which could or is aimed at causing another reassessment?
If it occurs, I would assume that it would be the school district that would do it.
Radnor School District, or a collection of school districts, or just in our
It would
case?
be a collection of.
So how do we facilitate that collection to pursue that?
I don't know the answer to that.
I think we'd have to wait and see what they decide. If we're going to follow their lead and support what they're looking for, let's wait and see what they decide.
Just one more. So let's talk about these appeals have been filed, and the appeals are filed with the Assessment Review Board currently. So it has to go through the Assessment Review Board, and then if they say no, which is likely, then it has to go to Common Pleas. So these 285 are just at the administrative stage right now in the assessment review.
I don't think the two necessarily are connected while they're happening simultaneously. I think the appeals are from the last assessment that occurred. However, there is still, I would think that they would file a challenge to what has already happened. So going back to the same case that was in the 2015 order that came out.
Right, that's what we agree. So right now, the school district is challenging 285 properties. They are challenging them based on the reassessed value. They're saying, as of July 2019, this is too low. It should be higher. They do that first by going to to Assessment Review, the Board of Assessment Appeals. Then they have to go to Common Pleas, right? Or are they skipping doing something different? That's my question. What's the procedure that they're doing?
they can do both.
I think they can do both. I think they can just somewhat appeal the actual reassessment itself and say that it was not done correctly.
So is that's what the tenor of these suits are right now?
Again, I don't think that they've decided what they're going to do and how they are going to proceed with it. I wish I had more information for you, but at this time they did not state one way or the other, they were looking at all options, and they would update us when they determined, and they would hopefully appreciate our support when they do it. But I don't think that they knew what direction they were going to go yet.
But so right now, they had to, so did he tell you exactly what they've done right now? So they filed papers somewhere,
They have not filed papers except for the appeals.
and those appeals were filed concurrent at the common pleas?
I believe, no, they would be done at the Board of Assessment level, and I think typically they need to be done before August 30th.
Right, right. So again, the timing of it is that it's likely that any changes will be next year. It'll be after this is set, so that's.
For those appeals, yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Moving on to item H, 2021 budget calendar approval. Mr. White.
I will tee this off, thank you. And then Bob can fill in any blanks or questions as we go along. So, Ian, if you could put up my computer again, just for the folks at home. This was in the packet. The flow of the budget discussions is similar to prior years. The one difference that we're looking for, and we're hoping that we could get a commitment from the board tonight, is adding a special meeting on Monday, October 19th, which would, the sole purpose of that meeting would be to allow the administration to present the first round of the budget. Between now and then, we'll be working on that, including the departmental presentations, and then instead of trying to fit that discussion in on a regular board meeting night, it might make sense just to have a special night. And we can limit it if we get direction from the board saying, fine, we'll meet, but we want to cap it at an hour, 2 hours, whatever you feel is appropriate, we can do that, and we'll gauge or gear the discussion that night to fit however you would like to see it done. From there, we have opportunities at various other times and meetings to dig into specific areas of the budget as we've done in the past. We can always schedule more meetings beyond that, but we've kind of gone both ways in the past. So in some years, we've scheduled a bunch of meetings, and then it turns out we cancel half of them. So I think last year what we did is we went in and just scheduled the ones we knew we wanted, and then we've always got the opportunity to add them as we go along. So hopefully we can have a discussion and determination on Monday, the 19th. And then from there, we can adjust and pivot accordingly. Ultimately, to meet the advertising and adoption guidelines of our charter, we would need to advertise the budget ordinance on Monday, November 23rd, with an adoption then on Monday, December 14th. And that gives us, four other meetings, or 4 other Monday nights to have special discussions. 2 of those could be regular board meetings. But I guess a lot of that will determine on what the budget looks like, which is, as we sit here tonight, difficult to predict, as we discussed earlier with the MMO.
This looks fine to me. Is there anybody who can't make the 19th? Okay.
I'm not going to be here the 19th. Just being honest. Okay.
Well, we will have a vote
So so I'm fine with having a meeting on the 19th. That's going to be fine with me.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Item I, gift acceptance policy discussion. I'm going to start, I guess, with Lisa.
Okay, so Commissioner Mulrooney and I worked on this. So over the past, since I've been on the board, we've had occasion where groups have provided donations or other in-kind gifts, and I think that it behooves us, and I think Commissioner Mulrooney will agree that, we need to have some sort of policy to accept these gifts, some sort of procedure around that. So what I did is I just did a search. This is actually modeled after San Diego has a similar gift acceptance policy. What you see is edits from Commissioner Mulrooney as well as Mr. White. I don't know that Mr. Rice has weighed in on this, but the one thing that Mr. White, when he looked at it, he did remind us that we already have sort of an open space policy, so that we can probably pull that piece out of the gift acceptance policy because we already have something if somebody wants to donate open space. But, we put this out for board consideration for people to look at. I think that if we could formalize this, it will help create a more transparent process, in receiving gifts, when there is discussion with, businesses who want to give gifts, private individuals who may want to give gifts. So that's kind of the thought behind this. I don't know, Commissioner Mulrooney, if you want to add.
No, I think you've covered it nicely. I would like to hear from our colleagues about, after you've taken some time to review the document. But, I do think it's important. We've seen a couple of situations in the past where people have not been pleased with how things were handled that were considered gifts or some sort of donation of to the township. So in order to avoid that, I think it's not only good for the township to understand what we will accept, but also to make it clear to anybody who is a donor what the guidelines are and what their expectations of that gift could be. So, please give it a review.
Would we turn this into, an ordinance format? Would this become an ordinance? What's the next step with something like this? Is it just something that lives on our books that we know is like kind of like an AR? Like what is?
I would think that once you get it together, we'd put it in the form of a resolution. We did review it, or at least looked at it. We also had one of our, corporate tax attorneys also look at it. We had very minor edits that went in, nothing substantive.
Do any of the commissioners have any thoughts or comments?
I just have one quick comment. So I think that 7,500 is a large amount. I would like to know if it's 500. And that is to avoid, I guess, the opposite, Bill, what you guys call it, bid splitting. So you could have one family or one organization with 5 principals give $7,000 apiece, and before you know it, you're at $50,000, and the board didn't necessarily know if they're all done separately. So I would just like to see that number lower. I don't think we have people lining up around the block to give us gifts, but something stating maybe in the beginning of the packet of any gift that was given to the township. So we, that is over the limit or under the limit, so we have an idea of who gave what. I guess some people want to remain anonymous, so that may cause some kind of issue. Maybe we could learn about that in an executive session to see if we want to accept it. But I just think the 7,500 is a little bit too much. It's a little too high for me. I would like to see that number lowered.
So can you just outline the approval process? It talks about the township So how do you envision this works with who and everything under 7,500 is approved by Bill White, and then over 7,500 comes to the board? Is that how? Says the township must determine, so wherever this thing says the township, what does that mean? Does that mean the board? Does that mean Bill White?
Do we have, I think the town, is that in the definitions in the township? So beneficial, I mean, we could further define that, but I would, yeah, the township is, you know, usually this is going to come in through the township manager. We could put that in the definitions, the township equals, you know, Bill White, or it could come in through anyone, but I guess ultimately it does need to go to the beneficiary department head, which means the director of the township.
If I'm reading this, then gifts over 7,500 must come before the Board of Commissioners for approval.
We would try to keep it in line with the amount that the township manager already has discretion about spending at 7,500, so it felt like that was the threshold. That's, I think, how we got there. It doesn't mean it's the right number, but it's the threshold for spending, so we thought it could also be the threshold for accepting a gift. We were also trying not to burden some of the Parks and Rec sponsorship deals that Tammy has been doing for years. Those are often less than that. And that way, you know, we wouldn't bog down that practice when we've got to get sponsorship agreements for recreation, Parks and Rec.
Can I just jump in? Could that be something that could easily go on the, if you do lower that number, that could go on consent? Or
I'm
no?
sorry, I can't.
If, sorry, if you do lower the number, are those items that could easily go on the consent agenda? If it is Little League or, I mean, no, I think for the most part, no one's going to turn away a gift, but to the point that we had earlier this year, or was it the beginning of, or the end of last year, with a large sum of money being given to the township. It's probably last year. You know, was a question, you know, are there strings attached? So, again, I just want to keep everybody honest, quote unquote, so to speak. And, but I think a lot of this can be done on consent and can be just done, put in the packet as just a line item.
There's also, you know, money can be given and sit in a fund for quite some time, and by the time the township wants to use it, we want to make sure that there is a that the donor intention is there, that you know the purpose for the money is protected. You know.
And to that point, Commissioner Mulrooney, I think that under general principles, Section 10, a donor may restrict a donation. I just think that the language needs to be even more tightened there, and that we need more specificity on the language around what a donor may restrict, or how the township is to use money that is restricted for a specific purpose, both in terms of timeline, intent, you know, all of that type of stuff. I think that just needs to be broadened there, so that the intention of ensuring that donations are used for a said purpose is even stronger. I think that it just leaves that, the way that it's written there, and I appreciate you bringing this forth, Commissioner Borowski. I think it's a great start. I just want to see the language even blown out more and tightened so that there is no ambiguity.
Some people make donations that don't specify what it's to be used for.
And I feel that that's fine. I mean, we shouldn't restrict that, right? But
Right,
where
those are the
there
best
is a
kind.
specific, where there, yeah.
We
where there-
want the unrestricted.
Right, where there is a specific purpose, AKA Penn Medicine Veterans Park, that we are, I'm not sure if I even got that right. I think it was Penn Medicine Veterans Park, but that we are being very, very clear about that.
Veterans and First Responders Park.
Thank you, Commissioner Booker.
No pen, no pen medicine.
I sit corrected.
I think that the key is board approval of over 7,500, and that would be a new step that is sorely needed. I think that's absolutely imperative. The board approve them, no matter what it was. If it's going to be a new car donated to Bill White's personal use, if this board approves it, then that board approves it. But it has to be approved because it was a $100,000 car or something. But that's a hypothetical. But these gifts, and I think the anonymous issue is really problematic. That if we have say we have a gift of $50,000 from an anonymous donor, what does this policy do with that? Does anybody know the anonymous donor? Does the board need to know it in executive, or does anybody? Does just a manager, or nobody needs to know?
So typically, an anonymous donor is known by the entity. It's just not, their name is not put out publicly. But we can tighten that language to make sure that's clear. But that was our intention, that if somebody doesn't want their name in the paper, on a list of donors anywhere, and they want to be anonymous, it doesn't mean that the board, or especially the township manager and staff, they would know who it is.
I would urge that that the board be provided and kept. It could be a confidentiality agreement or not published or whatever it is, but I think the board, in accepting that gift, needs to know who it's from, even if it's not public.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't accept the $1 million gift and not know, who it's from or why we're getting it. Sometimes the larger the size, maybe there are strings attached. I think in general it's good. I'll agree with Commissioner Enderle. It sounds like it's a first rough draft, so it's good. Just make a couple edits, and I'm probably going to have, you'll probably have my support with it.
And I wonder if maybe some of these concerns could also additionally be addressed if we did an accompanying gift agreement that went along with it, that we would
Like
work
a standard
out with.
standard form agreement.
Yeah, that we would work out, and then certainly I would think the board absolutely should know, and whoever on the staff, who the person is, because we would need to do appropriate stewardship, right? So yeah, okay.
Yeah, if somebody wanted to donate $1 million, it might be fine, but they might have some ulterior, so we should know who that person is. Right.
Right, any other comments or suggestions?
So what's the timing on this? Is it going to have another revision? It's going to be a resolution, so what's the timing on bringing it as a resolution? Do we need to give edits, like, for next, we have a meeting on Wednesday, but it's like, when's our next meeting, regular meeting?
Monday, October 5th.
October 5th.
Yes.
So, I mean, what's the timing? Do we have 2 meetings to look at this, or comments by next meeting? What do you want?
I think, it would be great to get comments ahead of the October meeting so that we have time to get it into a format to be formally moved on.
If you want to just take this version, I mean, this is a red line version. You can already see what was changed from the original. Add yours to this document and then send it back, and we can make.
I think how we've done this in other circumstances is individual board members could send their edits directly to John Rice, who would accumulate them and incorporate them into a document that he would then circulate either through the board packet for adoption, or circulate, if there's enough that it requires some back and forth, maybe circulate it offline, clean it up, and then get it onto an agenda. So if I could obligate John in such a way.
Is there a way to, can we distribute the electronic version to give people an opportunity just to edit in the document?
Yeah, in Word, can we get it in Word so that we can make a red line?
I mean,
I think it's
have it,
already
or
there.
Bill has it, or.
Yeah, we already have it in, it was originally drafted in Word. So yeah, we'll get that to John to distribute.
Right, we only have it in the PDF, at least I do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but there is a Word version that we can distribute.
Yeah, I originally wrote it in Word.
Yeah, if we could get a Word version, and then that'll make it easier. for instance, on paragraph 12 here, the donor in accordance with Radnor Charter and generally accepted accounting principles, maybe that should be government accounting or GASB, right? I don't know. So I have stuff like that I'm going to take a look at.
Okay, comments to Commissioners Mulroney and Borowski. Do we have any reports of standing committees of the board? Oh,
Comments
sorry.
to John Rice.
Oh, comments to John Rice.
John
Never
Rice.
mind.
Comments to John
Yeah,
Rice. But we will, either Bill or I will send out the Word document, the Word version.
Okay.
Thank you. Peggy, I wanted to have another meeting for the subcommittee of the Community Development Subcommittee. I sent an email last week when you were away. Did you see that?
I did see that, Rich. I saw the response from Commissioner Larkin as well, that that item hadn't come to the township yet, so do you still want to have the meeting?
I do. I've had a request on that. So if we can have some dates, and if we have some dates, then we can talk about it further, but I had a specific
Rich,
request on that.
Why don't we talk offline? I'm not in love with the idea of the township holding a meeting on a plan that we have not had submitted to us. I think that you want to get some advice from John Rice on that.
Well, this is the perfect time to discuss what the issues are, so
And we
talk
can do
about
that
it.
and have been doing that informally in various township town hall meetings, but
And that's what this is. It's a subcommittee. There's no vote.
yeah, it's a subcommittee which is run by the township out of the township building. It's supposed to report back to the board. It can create some problems. Just talk to John Rice, see what he has to say. He may tell me he may tell you that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I foresee some issues. Do we have any, speaking of which, reports of standing committees of the board? Hearing none, do we have any new business?
Wait, I had one
Oh,
from
sorry.
the library. So the library had their board meeting last Thursday, and just so everyone knows, they are, they're very interested in following our budget process. So I told them we were voting on our calendar, so they'll be paying attention to that. But the Elves for the Shelves, which is the run that they have, it's their big fundraising event. They're having to take it virtual this year, so I'll be sharing with the commissioners, or they will be sharing. We're trying to generate a lot of publicity for it. We've taken a lot of our events at work virtual. We have a run going on right now. It's taking a lot of effort to get people involved and whatnot. So any help that we can provide them in pushing it out to the constituents, letting people know, and getting people to sign up and support the library would be great. You really have to run. You just don't have to show up at like 7 in the morning. In the cold.
Do we have any other reports of standing committees of the board? Last shot. Okay, new business. Old business. Final public participation. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, say
Second.
aye.
Second, aye.